so that we can focus on some things together. And as a good facilitator of a meeting does, this to me emphasizes our task and our theme, as you see, a spotlight on achievements and goals. So this is a flashlight. So our first job is to crank it up. So we're going to start there. And then that will help us to shed some light on the subject. Our number one goal, as you know, and the Commission prioritized them for the first time, is sustainability. So this emphasizes the sustainability since it's a hand-powered crank. And then thirdly, because it's a narrow beam, which should really come up in about 10 minutes of cranking, is that we really do want to focus, not to cut off a general conversation, but as we talked about whether we should hold a retreat prior to our new city manager being hired, we came to the conclusion that yes, we need to focus as much as we can so that we are really clear about what our mission, what the work of the city is, and what our work plan is, what our goals are. So that's kind of the purpose of this. We, I think, clearly acknowledge that. Well, and this will be open for discussion, too. We clearly acknowledge that when the new city manager arrives, we'll likely have a need for another set of meetings to do some joint planning together. But just to test the water first, the focus of, by the end of the day, what does success look like? So at the end of tonight, what at least we had hoped, so let me see if this is what your expectation would be also, so we can be focused on our expectations, is that we would have a group of urban renewal issues or points or set of priorities would be like the best case scenario. I don't know whether we'll get there, but those will be hopefully refined by the end of the day. And then likely we'll need to schedule another meeting for urban renewal to talk about those if some of them will take greater discussion or greater study or whatever. But anyway, so does anyone have a different expectation for today? Other than by the end, we will come up with a set of direction for staff on either what to do or what to bring back to us. Anything different? Okay. The goal for what success looks like for at the end of the day tomorrow for the City Council, City Commission, will be hopefully a general agreement on what our goals are and some of the objectives underneath them. So before we can do that, though, of course, with either day, it's good, I think, at the end of the year, and this is the end of our goal-setting year, because the City Commission holds an annual retreat to do planning on an annual basis, not a fiscal year basis. But, of course, that's important, is that we really need to take time to celebrate as well as take an honest look at the achievements of the year so we can build, of course, on those and then determine where we want to go. So as you see today, for today's discussion, we have a 2-hour time slot. We'll let Larry lead off and kind of walk us through that. And we thought it was very important for us to talk about those together, even not all of the goals or goal achievements aren't necessarily related to the Urban Renewal District, but they certainly are relevant to the Urban Renewal District. What happens in one part of the city certainly affects the other. So, and then Lloyd is here to talk to us about the design standards, and then, of course, general discussion. So the rules of today are, I think you can feel free to, raise your hand and chime in at any time because we want this to be informal. It's our time to discuss. Staff is here as a resource, and then again, remember, focus, focus, focus. So by the end of the day, we will have come to some common understandings, even if it's to agree to disagree, I guess. Any other opening comments? All right, let's move right on in then. And Larry?
Good. Thank you. Nancy, you might want to bring up that goal thing. But before we start that, I want to kind of give you a couple of things. On the board, what we have, and you can look at this kind of at your leisure, and it may help you as you focus through the next couple of days. But these, of course, at the top are the 6 goals that the City Commission established. Underneath it is more or less the actions that this indicates, either the actions that have had some discussion or underway or at least have been kind of planned that we're going to try to undertake. I've got them color-coded. You'll see the ones in blue are kind of the ones we entered the year talking about. The ones in red are things that have come up and been added to that. And all that's for just kind of show you that objectives under the goals are fairly fluid, because goals can be as much a question of opportunity as it is a strategy, because when you get this many things going, some of them are going to hit high ground at certain times, and others you can be able to move along. And plus also it's you're going to bog down in a couple and it slows down a bunch of things. So that continues to change as you go through the year. I think the important thing is look at, and for you to make a decision, how much is too much. Do we add more things to it? Do we change what's there? And as you begin to look at next year, you might want to look at those and see if there's anything else that you want to add in there, and really do we have the resources to do it. What you'll see is there's more issues than what we're going to have time to discuss here over the next tomorrow and whenever the Urban Renewal Commission meets. It's also a question of really, do you have the resources and capability to do everything that we're trying to do, and how much controversy can you take on at one point? Because with any issue you put it on the table, part of the community is going to agree with it, and the other part may not see it the same way. So with that, I do want to talk a little bit about goals, and I'm going to take it from 2 angles. I'm going to go back, since this is my last retreat with you, I want to go back and look at the last 7 years, because I think it puts in perspective kind of how far we've come, and it may help. And I will say, the one thing that I don't think any city does is spend enough time really reflecting on what they've accomplished or talking about that, because we're always busy looking at where we're going. And because of that, you do run into a lot of folks criticizing, because we forget. We have short memories, really just where things were at. So I've also put over, you have these at your place as well, but for those that may not have a packet, you've got some things there. To start off, I think the major, and I'm going to summarize, you also have a very detailed list in your packet of the accomplishments that's been done over the last 7 years. I'm just going to kind of give you a quick summary, and I'm definitely not going to read all that, but I'll give you a couple of highlights. I think one of the most important things that I think we have improved, at least how people see Oregon City, be it from folks inside the city or folks in the region or even state looking at it. I think the other thing, too, by doing that, we've also increased the credibility of Oregon City as well as becoming a regional player. When I say we've increased the credibility, doesn't mean everybody's agreed with everything that we do by any stretch of imagination, but I think one of the reputations we've got is, if we say we're going to do something, we're going to get it done. Because I know when I came, I heard a lot of criticism of the city because it had some street projects that didn't get finished, and of course we had the South End Fire Station sitting there that was vacant, and that led a lot of folks to questioning whether we could do what we said we were going to do. The economy, I think, has improved in the last 7 years. Definitely we are, like everyone else, we're feeling the effects of the downturn, perhaps not as bad as others, and there are some projects that are still creeping forward, and that's a good sign. Definitely the transportation system has improved. You look at McLaughlin Boulevard, Beaver Creek, Washington Street, especially from 13th to 16th, 7th Street. Of course, we've got the trolleys running again, and those were actually in storage at time, and of course Amtrak has come to Oregon City. The big thing I think that we forget, and maybe we've been further along the road, or maybe it was kind of a blessing given the fact of the downturn in the economy, is we really have brought the city back from the brink of bankruptcy. And if that hadn't been done, we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about some of the things we're going to do, because we just didn't have the capacity, and we were really faced with, the city taking on I'm not sure what road would have taken if that would have happened. We've also, in that whole process, besides just turning that around, there were a number of areas that really were problematic within the organization. There were some problems in certain areas, pool being one that comes to mind. We really had some issues of handling money, had some that actually disappeared over there some, but we was able to recover that, and that's luckily that. Yep. We had issues at the senior center. In fact, when I first came, I couldn't believe the senior center was a place of controversy, and that has really turned around, and I think things have been really quiet down there. I think it's because Kathy's able down there to herd cats and make everybody happy in ways. So PERS definitely has been an issue. It continues to be an issue for folks, but I think the storm clouds on the horizon are looking a little bit better with the uptick in the economy, and again with the reserves that we've created. I think we can weather that better than some others might do that. Union contracts, I think we've put those on a good path. First got here, some of those contract settlements were definitely not sustainable, and that's not all our doing. Our employees really have worked with us too, but it took a while for all of us to kind of understand what we were looking at financially, but we've come a long way with that. And urban renewal, kind of what we've done with the expansion of the plan. If you recall, where we were looking at before we expanded the plan is really we had all the money in the old plan committed, so we really wouldn't be talking about doing anything at this time other than just finishing up a couple of projects if we had not to move forward.
Well, Larry, I'm looking at your sheet here, and I see that you have the fire on the next section under improving public safety, but I would kind of beg to differ that that's what should belong where you are talking right now, because that was one of the biggest things we've done in the last seven years.
Well, and it ties into the financial picture as well.
Yes,
and
to the financial picture.
Yeah. And the other thing that, too, is we did close a urban renewal district. We're always criticized on those, but we did close that ahead of time and didn't spend all the money that we could have spent in that program as well. So we made progress there. Public safety has been a lot of improvements there, fire probably being the biggest. We have created long-term stable financing for fire, and that was kind of a rocky road from about 2000 up until 2007. We opened the South End Fire Station. I think that's a big plus because that was kind of an albatross for us while it was sitting there vacant, but I think that has died and gone by the wayside very quickly since that's been open. Police, we've made a lot of improvements in that area. We've added officers. We've added the K-9 program. We reinstituted the school resource officer, a lot of new technology in police as well. Parks, definitely, I think we know the parks.
Remind us how many additional officers
we've done 7 in the last 7 years, which takes us from, well, I think we've gotten down at one point to 1.1 officers per 1,000, and now we're at 1.27 officers per 1,000. So, and though that may not seem like a large amount, what it takes to make that bump just a little bit is, I mean, that's a tough go. One of the questions we're going to have is how do we maintain the foundation we've set as we move into the future, because it's going to continue to take some investment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a bit. New parks, of course, Wesley Lynn was the first one in 27 years, I think it was. Now we've added John Storm, and we're looking at considerable more parkland as being part of the Cove project. The library, it was kind of a yo-yo. When I first arrived, I think we were at 35 hours. We went to 28 hours. Well, we went 35, then we went to 40, then we went to 28, and now we're back to 23.
Was the lowest.
Yeah, and
oh, yeah, we were the lowest hours of any public library, perhaps in the state, but it was the county, with the biggest
there was
service
an additional
area.
part, Abernathy Creek.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's hard to keep it all track of all that.
Dedicate that one.
Now that we've now back up to 50 hours, we've got stable funding there with the creation of the library district, and as you know, that took a couple of times to get that through, and hopefully here in the next couple of months we'll be able to make a decision one way or the other whether we're going to purchase a facility for the library as well. So hopefully we'll be bringing that to the commission. Well, if we can put everything together and the other party is comfortable with that, we'll probably be looking at that probably as early as next meeting, maybe the one after, but probably next meeting. Definitely infrastructure.
Which commission did you meet?
City Commission. Yeah, it's, that's just out of the urban renewal district, so I won't engage that. We have improved the city's infrastructure. I won't go through all that. Probably the big one, and it's going to take a little bit more time to get caught up, is street maintenance, because with the creation of the pavement maintenance utility fee, as you recall, that ramps up over a few years, and you'll begin to see those streets begin to look better as that fund gets healthier as we move through it. We have improved citizen communication considerably. I think the web improvements, video streaming, kind of what we're doing here, those sorts of things. We have engaged the public with focus groups, opinion surveys, various city committees and task force. Definitely, you can always do more work in that area, but it's one that I think there has been a lot of citizen engagement here over the last several years. And in fact, actually, the Urban Renewal Commission and the expansion of that's even an indication of some of the different tactics we've taken with committees. City facility improvements, definitely City Hall kind of comes to mind. What we've done at the swimming pool, which is going to help us kind of keep that operation moving forward, because that's a 40-year-old pool now. Still have more improvements need to be done. As you recall, had the study indicates we need about $3 million put into that, but we've come a long way. We put a new roof on it, new HVAC, there's painting, there's some energy efficiency improvements over there, and we'll be looking at some more things next year. We've got a preliminary design for the police department, and we'll be talking more about how we might be able to move that onto the table. And again, the library is still a possibility as well. So just to, that kind of gives you a quick look at the last 7 years. Let me just turn just last year. If you look in your packets, there is a green sheet on that from Terry, and it talks about sustainability. You'll see the various things that we've done in that particular area. And again, this is a goal that was set, and we really haven't budgeted specifically for that. We're just kind of incorporating that in everything that the city's doing. So, you know, we have made progress on that. City Hall was constructed to meet LEED certification. That's our first facility that will do that. We're sending staff through additional training so all of us become more in tune with sustainability issues and what it takes to do things just a little bit different and kind of meet those things. We are encouraging through community development, as we talk to development, trying to encourage them to build to LEED guidelines. There's several new codes, tree ordinance, which we'll be taking up, steep slopes, those types of ordinances. In economic development, it starts with the cove and rivers, but definitely doesn't end there. What we've done Main Street, definitely with the storefront guidelines, the circulation plan, the parking study, which we need to implement. In fact, if there's anything that could probably help downtown more right now, is that parking improvements. So that's something, as when the new manager comes in, you probably want to put that as one of your first issues that you get moving on, because that's going to take some more pressure. But it's if we can't solve the parking downtown, it's hard to grow any new businesses down there. Definitely, we're in talk.
Try to do that pressure before you left.
Maybe you don't want to bring a new person in the middle of controversy. You'd like them to at least do in the beginning of it. Our recent discussions with Blue Heron and what might be able to take place there, that's kind of a new thing that has come up, but hopefully we can be of assistance to them and maybe look at how that area in the future redevelops. And so those are important discussions. Not quite sure what tack it'll take, but it's going to take some creative thoughts of how we're going to solve some of those problems. The Beaver Creek concept planning area, definitely we want to look at what we can do with employment lands there. One of the proposals we'll be bringing to the commission that Dan's working on right now is looking at a strategic investment zone proposal that the county is working on, and so we'll be bringing that forward. We have started some discussions with the community college in regards to targeted industries and how that may work more in synergy with the college. All of your public works projects, those infrastructure projects, are very vital to any economic development that we're doing. So that kind of lays the foundation so you can have a strong economy, and I think that runs throughout the city. One of the things, too, I think we have to maintain focus on is the job base in Oregon City, and we're somewhat blessed here in a lot of ways, because when we talk about the creation of more jobs, that's always a good thing. Those sometimes take time to do, particularly when you're talking about locating and growing new businesses. But we can't forget what we already have. And we have a pretty stable job base, and a lot of that has been a little bit, I won't say resistant to the downturn, but maybe it hadn't been affected as much as some areas have. And those are the hospital, which is a very strong economic engine, and of course a recent merger with Providence. Hopefully you're going to see additional growth in that sector. We are a government center. The county, the college, and even the city. Those definitely are family wage jobs, and there is a number here in Oregon City. The mill, which again is going through difficult times, but those are family wage jobs. You have a number of smaller manufacturers such as Benchmade knives. You have downtown, which I think many times is overlooked, but I think that's estimated about 900 employees, I recall. And again, that runs the gamut of whether they're entry-level jobs or higher-paying jobs, but you have a number of small business owners who that's how they make a livelihood, and they employ a number of other people as well. And then you have a number of professionals in this town, particularly those associated with the court system and the hospital, that add to this economy, and those have all been, those are fairly stable areas, as stable as it can be in these days and times, but I think we don't want to look past what we have. It's a question of how do you build on that.
I think it's important to add to that during this economic downturn, and even with the Arch Bridge imminent closure, which has since been delayed, Lloyd has told us all that 14 new businesses have located in the downtown, and I believe we've only lost 2. So net 12, and I think that's pretty outstanding. And I don't think we really have statistics for the rest of the city, so we don't know. But they're certainly continue to add more than subtract. It looks like up on the upper levels. So
tourism is a part of economic development, and it's definitely an area that we've struggled in as of late. But I think you also have to look and see what we have been able to do, and we have the task force is looking at the EOTIC, and hopefully we can find a solution there. While we're doing that, the visitor center continues to operate. The locks continue to operate, and that was kind of on the cutting block for a considerable amount of time. There's discussion with the National Heritage program that also may tie back in and help become part of that EOTIC, and of course we've got discussions with the Sternwheeler right now that could become an addition to the Oregon City waterfront. All those things kind of add small pieces, but it's all part of that.
Stick one more thing in there, too.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
We celebrated Oregon City 150th last year, and when you add up all of the visitation that came to all of the things that happened during last year, it's really quite a number. So Oregon City was really on the map for tourism last year. Yep. Unfortunately, we've lost some stuff since then, but it was a good year for tourism. Hopefully, we can build on that reputation.
Yep. With the critical facility needs, definitely we've made progress there. City Hall, and again, I think when you look at the cost per square footage, and again, looking at purchase and building, we are on the low end of what most of the most recent City Hall's been. Ours is $172 a square foot, whereas the ones in the last couple of years were ranging from $181 to $500 a square foot, so we've done very good there, and again, that is the purchase cost and the renovations as well. I've already mentioned the preliminary engineering that we've got on the police department, what we're doing on the library, Public Works Operations Center. I know that's been a contentious issue, but something has to be done there, and we are moving forward on that plan. We have a financial plan. Definitely we've gone through the land use. There's some conditions. We'll be working to bring that facility online, which will also provide additional movement out of lease space with community development as Public Works transitions to that site, and you can move community development back in here. There may be a possibility, too, you might be able to do something in the interim with community development, maybe even long-term, which opens up space here with the decision we make on the library as well. Could provide some space in that facility, depending on how all that comes together. You have the Carnegie Task Force that's underway. Definitely the discussions regarding Ermatinger and the transfer of the National Park Service is very important, and I've mentioned the swimming pool as well. Under livability this year, definitely police staffing and our ability to respond to issues. What the chief is doing right now in regards to changing of shifts is definitely going to have, I think, 6 hours a day in which we have an overlap of shifts. And that's going to put more officers out there on the street so we can be a little bit more proactive. Chief just sent me an email this afternoon, too, that our labor negotiations made national news. So that's yeah. We have made improvements in administrative staffing. Ms. Bankhead is now associated with my office, which has helped us there. Of course, Kelly is with City Recorder's office, and there's assistance there. there's still some needs in that area, and we'll discuss those a little later. We have added one additional parks maintenance person that kind of keeps us where we've been, and that was part of the fire annexation plan. It's the one area that we really haven't addressed a lot. And again, as we look at heritage, one of the things that I'll talk to you about is if we're going to add these new components, where do they go? And I think when we start talking about our tourism component and heritage, you're probably looking at community services, and it's the one area that could definitely use additional assistance. We've had
Didn't the national studies say that we were among the lowest staff ratios in the nation in our parks department?
Yeah, I think if I recall this, it's been a while since I've looked at them, the national average, and again, national averages are national averages, but it gives you a guideline, is I think for every developed parkland, you have one parks maintenance worker to 16 acres, and we're at 1 to 32. So we're more than double behind what we're doing there. But our folks do a good job, and really some parks do a really good job. It's some of the other areas we just can't get to where you see, and again, that's all on a priority basis of which one's kind of getting the most use where we try to go to. The whole discussion about local aspirations, and I assume that will continue as we go through, but I know there's still some debate there, but those are some long-term strategies that how this, not just Oregon City, is going to develop, but the whole region, and we've been part of that. The capital improvement program can never leave that behind. I think sometimes we kind of forget those projects are going on out there and what it takes, but that really takes a big time out of Nancy's staff and her time, and each of those projects have their own complexity to it. And again, we have a capital improvement program about $4 million a year. Definitely for the size city we are and growing, we'll probably use a bigger one, but we're stretching every dollar we can to stay on top of that. The regional wastewater stormwater regulations, those are moving forward. That just recently came up at the City Commission, and we'll be looking at maybe adding to those standards. Well, that'll be an interesting discussion as we move through those discussions, but that will be important. I think that's probably one of the big topics for the next decade is stormwater management. Regional wastewater improvements, particularly the discussions about mitigation and urbanization, very important for Oregon City. You will see I've got some little numbers by these things as well, and that just indicates some of these you'll find under more than one goal. That's one that probably transcends at least 3, could be more. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to figure that out, but especially when you get into those mitigation issues and the urbanization policies around the region, that's going to be big. That will have an impact for urban renewal because, again, how sewer goes is where urbanization takes place, and definitely with Clackamas County, you've had some that's taken place outside of incorporated areas, and that takes away from forcing that into the incorporated areas, takes away the economic opportunities for downtowns and things of that nature because it's cheaper to go out in unincorporated areas because you're not paying city tax and what have you. So it's.
May I suggest that we really had 3 goals? One was mitigation, one was urbanization, and the third one was green.
Yep.
That we really wanted that footprint to be the highest green technology, and we want to be able to use the gray water, among other things.
And then, of course, the historic nature of Oregon City is big for the city. The inventory last year was one of the big accomplishments that community development has been able to get done, so that should help in that as well. Goal 5 is the increased communication with citizens and facilitate citizen participation. Probably the big effort in that area last year was a reactivation of the CIC and the re-energizing the neighborhood associations. William's been actively involved in that. And definitely we've got a lot of work to do in that area. So I think there's some improvements on that, but we've got a good start, and it's moving in the right direction. Video streaming, the website improvements, and our whole discussion with WFTV will help with the communication piece, and I think citizens have reacted very positively to those improvements so far. And then finally, you get into maintaining the fiscal health and long-term financial stability. This year, we are moving into the 3rd year, this next fiscal year, of our fire annexation pledge, and I would say we are maintaining the promise that we made to the voters. We're definitely living within that less than 99-cent tax increase. I hadn't looked at numbers this year. It came in at 93 cents, and we, We've added a lot of things that had to be added, which I think we could call maintenance of services. Definitely the plan in some areas has collapsed in terms of some of the assumption, but we've been able to live within those resources so far, so we're continuing to try to do that, and I think we can do that through the third year.
Does anyone need to review the, excuse me?
I'm going to get to that.
You're
We're going to do
gonna
that
review it?
before we
Okay.
do that.
So the fire annexation pledge, as we budget 2,000.
And again, the trick is, can we even take it longer than 5 years? But you know, that's going to lot depend on lots of things, decisions we make, as well as things that come at us, and nothing's slowing down. That's for sure. It's just coming faster. We still have a ending fund balance of 10%. Depending on what we do next year, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And so that is really healthy when you consider we were looking at 1 year there about $34,000. So
$34,000, not $34 million.
not even close. Commission has made some very difficult decisions in regards to a series of necessary rate improvements, which are helping our utility funds, and though they will dip down some, it will help return them to health. And the creation of the pavement maintenance utility fee, another biggie, and of course the extension of the debt in urban renewal kind of gives us a lease on that, as well as recently we did acquire the $10 million for the line of credit, which kind of indicates where the district's at right now, and so we're in pretty good shape there. So I'm going to turn next to the budgets and talk about this, because without a good, strong budget, everything we're talking about can't be done. So we could go to the first one. I'm going to give you a couple looks at the urban renewal budget, and I'm going to give you a couple looks at the city budget. Roll that up. That one right there. That's a cool project on
Page 33, if you're wanting to see the fine print in your book.
Page 33.
33. There is no 34.
We didn't get books. Was that just the city commission that got them?
What?
Just the city commission got books?
I don't know.
No.
We can do something about that. We can do something about that, Brian.
Additional package.
No. You can tell these guys that are on the payroll and who isn't.
We'll get you a copy. Yeah. We'll have those in a moment. But we have the big screen, which will help. And we have
Bigger than the
email.
numbers in the book. So.
So we have a little bit of fire drill going on right now.
Yep.
Let me just kind of give you a quick look. First of all, let me talk about what's not up here, and let's assume no cove development. Again, we've got the $10 million line of credit. We were guaranteed, or we were approved for $9 million. We didn't really understand how they got there. We've been talking to them about the additional $10 million. All the email that I've received says, yeah, okay, we understand you qualify for 10. Haven't got the official word on the 10 yet, but I'm going to go with email from bond counsel and everyone else that the 10 is assured. We have closed on the preconditions for contingency period 1. So we have spent $3 million in the last week in regards to transfer those properties and the work product. So we have the availability to access $7 million. If the cove did not go forward in April, you would have the ability to spend $7 million. And at that point, you're probably going to go out to what would show here, because I assume it would be the same scenario, out to about 2017 before you're going to have any money to bring into other projects beyond the $7 million that you would have. Now, also, if the cove didn't go forward and you spent the $7 million, you would have a site that is development ready. If you didn't spend the $7 million, at least you would have accumulated all the property in that particular area, and you have a good work product kind of indicating what a developer is going to have to look at in moving forth in doing that. Now, if the cove goes forward, you're going to spend the $7 million, and then you get into a similar scenario, with the exception you have to assume that the other pieces are going to fall in place here at some point. Looking at that, you will see that we would spend the $10 million. That at that point, if you go to the line where it says sheet in the book. No, there it is. Hold it steady.
Well, that's much better.
Asking you.
Scroll up, down, excuse me. Right there. Amount available for other projects now going out this way.
Sideways, yeah.
It's 2017.
Yeah, 2017 is about when that would you'd begin to see some money. Now, you could probably squeeze a little bit out of that, because we're being fairly conservative. If you look at the ending fund balance there, you've got some over. So you could squeeze maybe 100, maybe 200,000, maybe 500,000, but you're not going to have a lot of money there. Now, this picture, and I didn't put that up, this picture dramatically changes. Gymnastically.
That's a good new word.
If you begin to get those other components of the cove put together. And so, therefore, it really takes on a whole different look. And that's what our hope is. And I believe if you get that development ready, even if Pacific Property Search didn't go forward, you'd have a piece of property not only would have a positive value, but I think you could attract another development. Now, that's assuming, again, that the economy is going to need to improve, because everything is difficult right now with the economy the way that it is. The next one, Nancy, you'll flip to the next budget. And what you have is the rivers. Now, this is some dated information because, again, we have just picked back up those discussions, and we're going to be meeting with them and looking at the design again, make sure that's right. And what you will see, too, is this is budgeted in there at $19.2 million, and really we're talking about 17.9, so it actually improves a little bit if we stay at the 17.9. There are some issues developing around Redland Road that may take another $1 million to fix, so we may still be close to this 19.2. But what you will see there is that if the rivers go forward as it's planned, and you get the development in that time frame, and that this is probably all going to get pushed back at least a year, is you'll see that if it developed as is, when the project came online, you would be able to issue the bonds to pay off the reimbursement to the rivers. You still have that bonded debt, but you would also, beginning then, have about $3 million available for other projects, and you will see kind of the years beyond that. So that is, and then if you add that to, if the cove develops as well, you add those two together, that is a lot of increment that would be coming in. Now, that's a lot of what-if scenarios, because it may take slower than this, and that's kind of the risk we're taking, but we'll see if that develops. So that does give you pretty healthy increment that you can begin to refocus on other areas of the urban renewal district to take care of. Without that, you're going to have about $7 million to deal with, and then it's going to be a while before you generate other dollars, and then they're going to come in smaller increments, so you can't do big projects the other way.
Does anyone have any questions about that or need other explanation of the financing picture? Okay. Rob?
I remember, and I haven't looked through the whole year, but I remember earlier when we were talking about the budget, somebody brought up the point that the sale of the property wasn't reflected. Is that reflected in these updating?
You're talking about the cove?
Development.
Yeah. No, the cove has, in terms of development potential, it has a negative value at present time. I think it was a negative $12 million. Because it's all got to be brought out of the floodplain. You had to do some of that environmental issues, which have been taken care of, so you had a negative value for its development.
But once it was developed, so it was a good piece of property, don't we do sell it then?
Then you would have a property that had a value to it. We'll have it reappraised at that point if we were to go sell and see what that value would be. But yeah, you'd have a positive piece of property at that point.
So then that would be cash that would be available
and
for
that's
urban
not,
renewal.
yeah, that's not shown in here at the present time because I don't know what that is. So there's really no way to reflect that. Besides, what we've looked at it is with the cove development going forward. So, yeah, good point.
But at that point, then you could, in theory, take that money and reinvest it in Main Street or between the rivers and Main Street or some other area,
urban renewal, and be urban renewal income, and you could figure out where you wanted to go with it. All right. Again, well, yeah, because you have, let's say it's $10 million. Okay, that comes into urban renewal. You could do a couple of things. You could pay off the $10 million line of credit or bonds that you had at that time, and then you're limping along with no money, or you can continue your debt service payment, which I would recommend to you, and you got $10 million sitting there to use. So it's whatever you get for it at that point. You've got some capital coming in, and you can decide then how you want to spend it.
Just throw one other little thing in. As you know, Larry mentioned that we're working with Blue Heron in their financial situation, and just a reminder, Blue Heron is not in the urban renewal district. Just a tiny piece of the parking lot is 1 acre, no less. You said less than an acre.
Okay, I'm going to turn next. If you don't have any other questions on urban renewal budgets, let's turn to the city budgets here. I'm going to give you a couple looks at this. Let me give a little presentation first because, when I first came to Oregon City, I'll overstate this because it wasn't quite this bad, but I would say that there was a lack of focus on what we were trying to do. It was more a combination of a variety of different projects that everyone kind of saw differently. Because of the crisis we went through, also the fact we began to set goals, I think we became focused, and that really helped not only address what we were trying to get done and getting it done, it also helped us solve the budgetary issue. As you get healthy, any city, as Oregon City has, the clamoring for dollars becomes great. And right now, I think you have about as many voices as there are different issues out there. And that makes it very difficult, particularly for the commission, because they have to balance all these competing needs and desire for money. And the reality is there's not enough money to do everything that everyone wants done, let alone what needs to be done. And that's where it really going to, the theme of this retreat is focused, because that's really going to determine how successful we are.
Larry, what does the eventual maturity of these projects in urban renewal do, just roughly, to revenue that was tax-wise? I mean, eventually that money, that tax base increases, and that money comes back to the general fund once everything's. I mean, in rough terms, what kind of dollars is that in the future? I mean, we're investing for something we're going to get a huge return, I assume, on in the future.
Yeah, at some point. But it happens before then as well. I mean, you don't get the property taxes coming back in until you release that property back into the district. But the catalyst of development, the other things that brings along, the other types of revenues that may qualify you for, as well as other businesses that may make investments in Oregon City, because my approach to economic development has always been, and particularly in smaller towns, it's more about community building. It's hard to go out and attract firms here if they look around and you're lacking all the amenities that they want, particularly if you're looking at the type firms that we want that tend to be more business park type things. Like one of the things I think would fit very nicely if Blue Heron were to redevelop down there, because it's not a great commercial site because you've got transportation problem. It could be a great corporate headquarters site. But it's hard to attract that type of decision on a corporate headquarters when they look around and they see the curb appeal and the lack of amenities at Oregon City, because they're going to want the shopping, they're going to want the restaurants, they're going to want those sorts of things. And for a small community, those are things you have to think about what do we need to make this place attractive to bring those type of investments. Now, again, there's some downsides to all that, because you do get bigger and it does have different impacts. Congestion is a fact of life that's only going to get worse, and people react pretty negatively to those aspects. But I think there's a lot of things that happen long before you release the property to come back in.
But once the property is released, are we talking about how many, just in relation to your
the code? The code, I think, as I recall, and I'm calling this off the top of my head, I think it's $1.9 million for the code. And if so
that's like a 10% increase in.
Yeah. And if I recall, I think the rivers, again, and I'm assuming at that value, and that, Dan's got a meeting set up with them. We're going to look at the design here before in the next couple of weeks. I want to say that was 3.2, but I may be overstating that, so I need to go back and look. So.
Since you went back, I want to thank you brought up the rivers again. When we had our initial discussions, they were willing to front monies for some of those that are being dealt with in other ways, specifically the jug handle. But there was an additional, I don't know what we're talking about, $7 million.
No, they still, and the plan is, and in fact, actually, I would not recommend that you enter into the arrangement with them if they don't do it this way, because it's really the way it comes together. They are going to front the development cost, which for them is roughly $300 million development. Now, for us to do that, there are some site issues that have to be taken care of, and that's the $17.9 million, and that's what they would like us to reimburse them if they do that. And again, if they develop it up front, is until they get that increment on the ground, we don't have to reimburse them. If they never accomplish that, we don't reimburse them. If they accomplish that, it's that scenario I just showed you that you can pay that off with one bond sale. Then you still have the debt service you got to pay on that, but that gets you there.
You brought up the 10 million, of course, that whether we get it back. Rivers wasn't in that picture, but the point is, from the standpoint that we have right now, it's something that gets reimbursed in the future. So it's not in this array of a picture. Right. Okay.
And again, I think too, you have to look at those two projects on that north end. I think if they came to pass, and the Cove is moving forward, we've met precondition 1, we're working on precondition 2. I think the Cove will come to pass. Now, whether they get it all developed and all, that's something that remains to be seen. And again, that's any part of the development game. The rivers, I am pessimistically optimistic.
Hey, that's really optimistic for you.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's a tough stretch, and there's still a lot of discussion that has to go forth, and the clock is ticking. I mean, working with Scott Parker and that group, we're going to try to bring something to the Urban Renewal Commission before the end of March. And the reality is, if it's not done before the end of March, it's going to be very difficult to move forward. For a new manager to come in here with a project like that, where you have a division and opinion on that, that's a tough go for a new person to step into. Now, they may want to do, they may say, fine, do it, but I think that decision probably needs to be made before then if it can be put together. There's just a lot of work that has to be covered. And again, I've heard Senator Cal say they want to move forward, and all indication I have is that's true, but we need that development agreement sitting on the table and saying if we see eyeball to eyeball or we don't, and we'll know more at that particular juncture. At the end, got a bunch of stuff over to them on Thursday. We're going to try to meet with Steve Janik next week. There's still a couple of pieces of information that's missing. The big one that's hard to define is the coordination between the jug handle improvements and the opening of that center, because we're going to have to work through ODOT to make sure that works. I mean, you just can't open that whole center without that jug handle being improved, and who does what first is kind of an interesting question. So we'll be working on it. You could open pieces of it.
And so what you're basically the Cove is we're putting up the $10 million, and then we're going to get money back as the property gets developed. So it's us, and then we get money back. The Rivers is they're putting all that money up, and then we have to pay the money if they follow through and
they got to do what they say.
That's a whole lot different concept on the Cove.
And you don't normally get that, so that's that's a real coup if we can pull that off. We'll see. That's why I want to get a development agreement in front of them and see.
Can I just interject two things while we're doing a review here? Because I think it's really important that we talk knowledgeably about urban renewal, that the other benefits that Larry mentioned in the urban renewal district are the construction excise tax that goes to school construction, and legislature just improved it as far as the administrative fee. We collect that and then send it to the school district, so that helps that fund. And then the other thing that's collected by increased employment in the area, of course, are income taxes, and our school system in Oregon is funded through income tax, so that essentially is a benefit to that particular aspect of the community.
And the Rivers and the Cove are really a worst-case scenario when I look at these things, because if you take a look at Bridgeport and look at all that happened around there, that all is tax base for and growth for the city that's outside of the budget numbers that are here. So
that's what Dave Leland was talking about when he was here, and we've kind of laid out some things. I mean, if you look at the Stimson property, if you look at Big Blue, if you look at that 16 acres across the Highway 213, and you assume that all begins to develop, and then kind of what may happen on the other side of the freeway with the Cove, particularly those properties we own along McLaughlin, hopefully that will encourage Oregon City Shopping Center to do some stuff, is we could conceivably see with those two projects and the subsequent development $800 million of new assessed value being created in that. Now, again, that doesn't happen overnight, but it's not really slow either when you look at what's happened at both Bridgeport and then Cascade Station. I mean, you've seen a lot of subsequent development since that has gone in. Other questions on urban renewal here? Going back to the city budget is we are healthy right now, but I would say we're kind of at a point where the wave is crested, and it's beginning to slide the other way. And so one of the things, I think, as we move forward and we look at other things, we're going to have to make some decisions. And one of the things...
Tell why you think it's crested.
Huh?
Tell why you...
I'm going to show you this
okay.
in just a second. Is one thing, we worked long and hard to kind of address some of those staffing issues and other things, and police is one of them where we were really behind, and I won't say we're where we would like to be, but we're in a much better spot than where we were. And the question is going to be, and again, you got parks that needs to be addressed. We have made improvements in the administration side of things. So the question is, at least we've got a foundation we've kind of got laid. One of the first order of business ought to be maintaining that, because if we allow ourselves to fall behind, how we catch back up, I mean, this has been a painful process to get to, and you've had to forego other types of priorities just to get there. So as we look at new programs, if those new programs don't come with revenues, I think you really want to think long and hard before you take on new responsibilities. So turning to the city budget, and again, I haven't updated these because this is just trending documents, and there's a lot that could take place here. And again, this was based on a 5.5% assessed value growth, and last year it was at 4.25%. So that's the first red flag. It kind of jumps up, even though before historically it had been running about 6 to 7%. So hopefully we can get back in that kind of area. And again, these types of development may help bring some of that. But if you look at this, you will see, if you go down to where it says ending fund balance and the contingency percentage, you will see that is, we're right now at
19.7.
19.7, and you will see it's going to kind of crest there at 20.2 this next year, and then it begins to decrease. And this is without anything new being added. And by that last year out there, and you got to do something long before that, is it's gone negative again. So those adjustments have to take place. I would say at least back by the time you start hitting that 11.5, but it'll happen sooner than that, because there are some other things that's going to have to take place. Unless, again, some of the costs that we have, and then we've got 6% growth in personnel services. We're running a little bit below that. Materials and services at 3%, a little bit over that. Capital is at 2%. We're a little bit over that. Transfers, that's I can't even control that side of the budget. It's just, I mean, a lot of that has been some of the impacts we've had in community development, which that transfer has really jumped around. And we're about as thin as you can get down there and deliver service. So, you know, again, until development picks back up, is we're going to continue to see that. And there's a lot of things in that you just don't get fees for. All the long-range planning stuff, and those are major initiatives for us, is you just, you know, that has to be subsidized. And so you're going to continue to see some of that, particularly in Oregon, because that is, I mean, we've made it an art farm in Oregon when it comes to some of these planning programs. So
the commission that exists, we're not living our full rate on our...
Right.
That's right.
After 12/13.
And that happens before you're 11.5.
Right. Oh yeah. You've got several options, and this is where you're in better position than anyone else. That's why I've told candidates to call. I mean, this is in a lot of ways the best job in the state, because you have a lot of buffer. We're not levying our full tax rate. We're about $1 below that. I still think you probably need to look at some point in the future of maybe something like a parks maintenance utility fee, taking something else out of that general fund, because again, you just got some balances in that. Now, having said that, there's a couple of things that you have to kind of factor in, and especially when you begin to look at new things. I don't know if all of you saw in the paper, I think it was Tuesday, the Pew Institute was talking about 30 states have budget problems. They're talking about increasing taxes. Now, what that says is there not enough money in the system to do everything that we've got into? So it's really a question of priorities. And it's always been that way, but it's even more so now because the cost of everything is so high, and with the economy low, the revenues just aren't coming in the way they did. Also, too, in that same paper, there's a big discussion about some of the citizens' initiative to limit local governments. And so you have to be very careful. I mean, citizens have been very patient with us, and they've understood and been very patient, as I said, in terms of looking at a lot of the increases that we've had on big tax increase, a number of rate increases that are scheduled to continue to go on. I think those are sorts of things. As long as you're doing that within a reasonable method, folks understand, because they understand we're like anyone else. You've got to have money to continue to meet all these demands. But what is too much before you get that reaction? Because you already have some things. I mean, there's some things we could do right now that would save us money, and you could move much faster if we had the ability to issue revenue bonds. But because of what happened before, that's in the charter, and you got to go to a vote on it. And that's not a bad thing, but it's those type of things that really tie your hands, that you spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money to get to where, before, if there was, if folks really understood what you're doing, there's just more patience and you can move quicker, especially with things that are coming at you quicker. It's time consuming, so.
If I could just reflect briefly on a discussion, we had a mayor's meeting last evening, and the general consensus around the region is that it's going to be very difficult to go to the people to ask anything because of all the things that Larry had just said. And then secondly, Americans for Prosperity have moved big time into Oregon, and they're looking at all the small towns. Those are the initiatives that have been put up in Damascus. In fact, the consensus, again, of the group is that Damascus may have to disincorporate to be able to start over again, because there's no way that they can't spend any money without going to the vote of the people. They want to raise a penny for their parking. They don't have that, but it's moved into Estacada, Cascade Locks, Lake Oswego, and they're again trying to put tax limitations measures, which are extremely, they're just very, very harsh in communities. So we just need to be really aware of that, and of being conservative. I think doing our funding internally when we can, and taking a long view.
Let me give you an example of why our initiative process creates a big issue. And I'll go back to my past city and Ben, because I was talking to those folks just recently. And they're struggling with the same issues that we have, other than the fact their city now of pushing 90,000. They have a tax rate of $2.83. When I first arrived in Ben, it was $5.11. And under the old system, as you were successful economic development, not only did your tax base go up 6% each year, but the tax rate fell to balance that, so the burden was spread among all the different users. So they went from $5.11, and then Measure 50 came in, which created everyone with a permanent rate. So here's a city that was, and this is only one of many, they're very successful under the old system. We elect new system, and no one ever talked about that, and all those cities now are just cast in budget crisis. So what we're doing, and we've seen it here, the way they're solving that is we're creating special districts. Tax burden is no less. It's just shipping it out, and it's the death of cities, one service at a time. We've done that in the last couple of years. While we're healthy, we got rid of the fire department, and we've gotten rid of the library. And we're talking we need maybe strip something else out of that general fund. So, the tax system is broken, and we're not even talking about that. And, again, you see this around the state. It comes to a question of what standards do we want to live at and what costs do they come at. And what we have, you've got these interest groups that continue to hamstring folks to the point that, well, we'll see what happens next week. And I won't get into that because I guess that's a political statement. I won't get there.
I'll tell you, I attended the South End neighbors. They asked me to speak on something. And, turned out I didn't speak on it. I was going to talk about these. I want to talk about other things, which is fine. But the chief, the chief was there, and apparently there were discussions going on about creating an urban renewal district along the McLaughlin corridor between the county, and it's clear they're not very happy about that at all.
Yeah,
and,
no, it's tough to get those going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything
about us
yeah.
in the process.
Any initiatives are really tough these days. So let's see. Let's look at the next budget. And this is a water up, and again, I have not cost these things up. You're going to go up a little bit more, Nancy. I need to get these new right there. It says hold there. If you look, we've talked about a lot of things, and a lot of this is cast upon us in case. Definitely police officer, we've kind of got that one addressed. We've added the parks maintenance worker. All that was part of the fire annexation program. We're looking at the police station. We've got money budgeted for that remodel. And then you get into, again, we're looking at the Ermatinger House. At the same time, we're talking about maybe transferring that to the National Park Service. Do we need to do improvements before then? What's that going to cost? And again, that's something that we definitely need to look at. The EOTIC, and this is a little bit dated because we decided not to do the interim step, but I don't know what the task force is going to cost. We didn't budget for that, and we have, how many RFPs do you get?
It's going to cost you a lot. Based on the budget.
They're coming in from all over the nation.
By 4:30, I have 18.
So that's got to be in there. Of course, Carnegie, I don't know what that's going to come out. And so we made a bunch of assumptions on this. And if you look up at the top there where it says, it's okay, Nancy, right there. You look at the ending fund balance. If, let's say we did all things, and I also projected some revenues for the EOTIC or EOTIC, and I don't know what, again, this is just WAG, so it's kind of hard to put this together. But if all of that was what the costs were, and we jumped into those, you will see that ending fund balance really begins to trend down to the point that next year we're down to actually I think that's this coming budget, we're down to the 9.1%. We fall below 10%. And I would suggest to you that as early as next year, if we were to try to assume all that, we need to start making some adjustments. So the question, if you added this, what do you go back to that we're doing that you begin to take out? Now, again, that's assuming a lot of costs that we have not costed out yet. These are just WAGs, what those costs are. But that kind of shows you where things go. And, again, this gets negative
Where's the 9%? I don't see the 9%.
9.1. Ending fund balance. Contingency. Percentage contingency. You looking at the right one? It's behind you. Let me see that.
There's no. Oh, we're in the third year. I wonder.
Yeah, but this one, see, I think I'm off a year. But anyhow,
You are, okay.
At that point, you need to start making, at least in my book, you need to make, if you want to maintain a 10% ending fund balance. So, again, all that really indicates is you've got a foundation. I think we can address that because you do have this flexibility. But how much is too much, and what can we take on given where we're at financially at this time? So lots of what-ifs to play. And, again, these are just trending documents. If the economy were to improve and you're getting, greater than 5.5% growth, that gets a little bit better. But that just give you some indication of what we need to start thinking about and kind of where we may be headed.
And the ending fund balance makes a difference to our bond rating on how much, how solvent or how much cush we have, doesn't it?
Well, it does a lot of things. I mean, your ending fund balance is what you carry over next year. So, again, you don't get tax revenues. We start in July. You don't get tax revenues till November. That's kind of what we're paying our bills with going in that. If you don't have sufficient amount, you have to go borrow it, which costs you money. If you got sufficient amount, you've got it in the bank and you're making money off of it. So that also goes. Bond council looks at that. If you get below 10% and it's not coming back up, they don't mind it, one time where it drops or you got a strategy where it may drop and come back. They may look at that, but if it's like we were trending negatively, that's when we saw our bond rating go down. We had a negative outlook. We've improved that. So yeah. So those are sort of things you just kind of have to manage. And this is just the general fund. Now, again, utilities. That's one of those rate increase reports. And again, you've got some limitation like water. You can only do 3%. That's what we got budgeted in that. That's a slow recovery, but at least we're on the right road there. You do have to be careful with what you take on because you only have so much you can do it in. But this has been probably more problematic because you have more demands on this fund. The others are utilities. This is what we do. This is the cost for doing it. You have to manage those well. You got to increase it from time to time, and we went for a long period of time without doing that. But here, this is a dramatic fun, and it's been a roller coaster. So, anyhow, that's a quick look at things, and I think that moves us to Lloyd.
Oh, we're way ahead of schedule, like an hour. So that's terrific. Lloyd, why don't you join us at the table here? No. No, we're not scheduled for a break till 6:30, so, yeah, 45 minutes. Oh, does anyone need one?
Will not take a break.
Did we need a break?
I thought maybe you'll...
Here, Lloyd. No, sir.
I would like a break.
Does anyone else, do we need a break? Okay, I think you could feel free to come and go then, I guess, if you wish to.
No breaks.
No one asked for a break except Daphne, so if you feel you need to go.
She's heard it.
I just want a cookie.
No pressure.
Right. No,
No, I'm just kidding.
You got to get more people on the side.
I intend to actually help keep us ahead of schedule. I'm going to start with probably about 10, but maybe an 11-minute PowerPoint presentation to give the Urban Renewal Commission commissioners and the City Council commissioners a sense of what's happening downtown and how the work you do in your deliberations is impacting downtown, and also a sense of what else is happening and the other partners you have, because what's happening at the Urban Renewal Commission does influence the successes we're seeing downtown. I think Alice's goals of thinking about sustainability and focus, boy, that really does apply to downtown, and I think throughout this presentation you'll see what we're talking about. Spotlight. Let's get the spotlight on
revved
there.
up.
Yeah, rev it up. So I'm going to give you an overview of what we're working on and show you how urban renewal is important to and a partner to downtown's success. You can go to the next slide. Whenever I talk to a group, I need to make sure we're all talking about the same thing here. So allow me to indulge myself and explain again what's happening here with downtown. We're looking after downtown through a nonprofit organization called Main Street Oregon City. It's intended to guide and manage and help and assist in revitalization efforts. So big picture, it's a volunteer group of downtown stakeholders who set the vision and set direction. We also have the benefit of actually getting projects done, so it's a very nice program. Big picture, we're starting to talk about things like what types of businesses do we want to see in our downtown district, what type of development do we want to encourage, what type of image do we present for Oregon City to the rest of the world through our downtown, which is in many cases a gateway into the city. You might be asking, well, how's this relevant to Urban Renewal District? Well, as a partner that really focuses on the improvement of property, buildings, we have to do that often before we can talk about the right types of businesses being in downtown. We have to think about our physical infrastructure to encourage the right developers. We have to think about our physical infrastructure when we think about the image we're presenting to the world. So this big picture, it's extremely relevant to keep in mind as the Urban Renewal District continues to think about downtown as a part of the district. We can hit the next slide, Nancy. Thanks. Circle back around, stress a couple of things here. Main Street Oregon City is the entity, the nonprofit that was created to guide development efforts. You see a list here of the stakeholder groups, the people that are involved in the organization. These are partners in downtown's success. And again, if you were asking, well, how does Urban Renewal Commission fit in here? At the Urban Renewal Commission, we have business owners. We have property owners. All of you, I should say, welcome to downtown. You're part of the downtown neighborhood. If you live in the city, you're a neighbor to downtown. It's your downtown we're trying to improve. And certainly we have city officials on the Urban Renewal Commission, council in particular, who make decisions, policy that influence downtown. So that's a sense, to me, that's a very important slide. It shows big picture, who's involved in making downtown a success. The next slide gives you a taste of the specific team we have together in 2010 that should get the good recognition when we do have a success. Of course, this is the team that if things don't go right, well, it's on their shoulders. I'm not trying to pass the buck, but I want to share the good word that there's good people working on behalf of downtown, and these are some of the specifics people on the board. There's some people that are also around this table. We can move on. Very specifically, and this is actually, I'm going to start transitioning out of the conceptual here, but through the organization Main Street Oregon City, we focus on 4 areas, and we do that in partnership with other organizations. We focus on marketing and promotion. We focus on economic development and business recruitment. We focus on design, preservation, and planning, and we focus on organizational capacity building. Urban Renewal Commission has a specific role to play, most often in the design, historic preservation, and planning, because under that category, and even under the economic development category, we're talking about good buildings, healthy buildings, sustainable buildings, buildings that are relevant, buildings that attract businesses. It starts first with the improvements that we often see funded through urban renewal. So we got a lot going on. Next slide, I'm going to give you a real quick highlight of some of the other projects we're going on. Not all of them relate directly to Urban Renewal Commission, but you need to be aware that they're happening because I want you all to know you're working in partnership when we're focusing on downtown. I'm going to talk a little more about Blue Collar Creative, which is a business recruitment and so it's an economic development and a marketing effort. That's relevant to Urban Renewal Commission because we can recruit all businesses till we're blue in the face, but unless we have a home for them downtown, it's wasted effort. So making our buildings tenable is important. Taste of Downtown is something you'll see in the next year, and I'm going to stay mums on that until you see it in the newspaper someday, and you'll say, oh, you heard about it first. Downtown Dialogue is a continuing process we do where we engage downtown stakeholders, property owners, business owners. Sometimes we even go so far as to engage ODOT in discussions about, thank you, Downtown Dialogue, a chance to talk about a future of downtown.
You have more success than we do?
No, maybe. Small wins with that one. As well as signature events. You can, again, say you heard it here first. September 11th, after the flag ceremony on the Arch Bridge, we will have a downtown car show. So we're talking about great old classic American cars in a great old classic American downtown. A nice combination, a new event that's coming together, as well as a July 31st First City Celebration, a summer event that's unique to downtown.
What date? What was that date?
July 31st. I think it's the last Saturday in July.
It is.
Of course, so this is, I say 2010 projects. It's stuff we started in 09 and will continue through 2010. We continue to keep the idea that the bridge closure is going to have an impact on our community. How do we deal and cope with that? And of course, we're very pleased that we just came off of a very successful holiday market, a concept of bringing a farmer's market back to downtown. I say back because it was originally there in 1926. I think we would probably see a return of that, not just for the holidays, but on a more regular basis. So just some good things to keep in mind. Great things are happening downtown. Let me go into a specific issue, a very exciting project. I know the name sets some people at ill ease, but it's a name that was carefully thought of and targets a specific demographic. Blue Collar Creative is we would call it a recruitment campaign, but I want the public to think of it as a branding campaign, a chance to revision downtown Oregon City, not just the whole public, a specific segment of the public, the creative shops, the entrepreneurs, the artists, who we want to attract into our community. We want to attract them into Oregon City, and downtown is one of the ways we want to do that, by rebranding downtown. We can go ahead and hit the next slide, and while I finish this, you can pull that up. Nancy Ides is going to pull up a video for us that some of you have seen and you liked it, and if you haven't seen it, you're going to like it, and even if you've already seen it, you're still going to like it. It's a very exciting video. Audio.
We're a full-service city.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead and pause it. We're still looking for audio.
Music or whatever.
Nancy, go ahead and pause it, and I will. Left-hand side, bottom left-hand corner. Yep. Let me give you a little bit about Blue Collar Creative.
It's really cool.
It's a homegrown approach to economic development. It's using the strengths we have downtown, some of our creative shops, including Funnel Box, and you're looking at the president, CEO, and chief bottle washer of Funnel Box at the table. He got together with some of the other creative firms and said, we want other creative firms downtown. Mind you, we need space for them to be in. We need buildings that can hold. Right? Okay. Those creative firms. This is our first step. It will be followed by a web page, and ultimately, I imagine, followed by a very mainstream marketing campaign to bring new businesses, bring entrepreneurs to downtown. Let's go ahead and roll video.
editing. And which shot? You've got to fund it.
Yeah, I was thinking about how I'm going to pay for this,
Yeah.
right?
Hey, you know, the guy who did put that together says that if he were doing that for a customer, that'd be a $40,000 video. So that was a major contribution to
wonderful.
our efforts.
Oh, there's
A very
one more.
crescendo ending. Maybe we're not going to get there. Yeah, it was playing earlier, right? It's okay. So you get a sense of the energy that we're bringing.
I remember the old days when we used to beat on the machines.
In a matter of weeks, this will be on its very own website that you can look at to your heart's content. And if I have anything to do about it, we'll see it elsewhere as well. It gives you a sense of the energy we're adding into, and we're cultivating downtown to go along with the physical development. I think we can switch back to the PowerPoint. Yep. I also mentioned this downtown dialogue. To me, this is very important. The Main Street Oregon City, as a board, as an organization, does not operate in a vacuum. We're constantly gathering input from business owners, property owners, residents, other stakeholders. Okay, so this, to me, that's key. That's key to success. We're building the capacity of our community to think about its future with downtown as a central theme. We can hit the next slide. One other thing we're doing, along with this concept of a downtown dialogue, is starting to talk about a future. These are images I've poached from the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition. I borrowed them because they were very good content that showed some dynamic ideas about a future. These aren't things we're actually going to do. It was representations of things we wanted to explore, exploring the potential of downtown. This one's hard to see at this scale. It's a graphic watercolor illustration done by a University of Oregon design student that explored how we might daylight Singer Falls. It's good to be having these conversations, and that was a very compelling idea. We can show you more details later, and certainly it ties to our participation downtown with the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition, a group that's operating at a more regional approach, but with Oregon City and downtown being important stakeholders. We can hit the next slide. Again, I'm showing an example, same process. Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition commissioned some students to come to work and explore some potential all around the area. They focused on downtown. This is a concept of how the waterfront might look. The waterfront we see now is a highway. How might a better waterfront better serve our community? Great ideas being shared. We can do the next slide. Here was actually an architecture student, but with the same group. Architects are always big into models. So the model we can't find, right?
Well, no, we know it's demise, yeah.
Okay.
We wanted to use the model in the presentation, the National Heritage Area 101 that we just had, and 3 days before the request, it had been recycled,
Oh, my God.
which is really too bad because
That's it then. That's the
this is it.
That's the picture. Again, it's not concrete, it's concept, but after about 11 months, 14 months to 11 months of being in operation, the downtown through Main Street Oregon City is starting to, one, find its voice, two, think about its future. And these are ways we do that. Okay, Nancy, we can hit the next slide. Okay, so why all this talk about downtown? Well, here's for our statisticians in the audience. This is downtown. 411,000 potential people could be a customer of a downtown. That's our market area. That's our area that we should be drawing from, but we're not. We're not there yet. We need to get there. 179 businesses in 175 buildings. That's good, but we've got room for more. And talking about sustainability, a good way to be a sustainable community is to be adding businesses into existing buildings and into a historic downtown that's been part of the fabric of the community for a long time. Interesting fact, we have 61 buildings that are eligible to be on the Federal Register for historic preservation. That does open up a property owner to a tax credit. We can certainly work with property owners on that when it's relevant. Yes, ma'am.
May I ask you how you're drawing your boundary? Are you up on 7th Street too, or are you just in...
These boundaries...
What's this?
Good question. Let me do two answers to that. Main Street, Oregon City, as a formally incorporated corporation nonprofit, had to draw some very finite boundaries. Waterfront to cliff from 5th Street to 15th, with a dogleg to include some of Washington Street.
To the interpretive center.
Oh, yeah, all the way down to the interpretive center. Let me give you the reality about a downtown. A downtown is stand on the corner, Main Street and 7th, Main Street and 8th, Main Street and 10th. A 5-minute walk in any direction, that's downtown. Downtown is not just the historic Main Street, it's the surrounding area, as well as the neighborhoods that become the pedestrian connection to downtown. If you live within a 5-minute, 10-minute walking distance of downtown, you're part of downtown. You're part of the marketplace as the local residents, as the local shoppers, as well as the businesses that make it a marketplace. So that's my rule of thumb, is a 5-minute walk in any direction from, say, the elevator. So we operate that way, but these numbers actually tied back to our defined area that we had to tell the state that this is what we are. Certainly we can hit the, well, again, Larry mentioned it, there's about 900 to 1,000 full-time equivalent employees. We have a lot of part-timers that come downtown, but total to between 900 and 1,000 full-time employees. That makes downtown an important economic engine for our community as a campus, as a business environment, as a commercial environment. And I can get this data to any of you via email or any part of this PowerPoint, so don't rush too fast to write stuff down. Here's a particular breakdown of the commercial environment downtown. And downtown is more than just commerce. It is more than just business. It needs to be a neighborhood. We've actually lost sight of that. We used to have people living downtown. We no longer have that. Downtown is supposed to be not just a commercial center, but a civic center, a social center, a residential center. These are things we'll return to, but right now, here's what we have happening commercially downtown, because there's zero residential happening downtown. There's a limited number of other, of the social happening downtown. We'll work on that. Hopefully, if those numbers added up, they'd hit the 100 and something number that we talked about. Please don't add them, but I think they're close. It's surprising when you think that there actually are 33 merchandisers, retailers downtown. That includes everything from 3 or 4 or 6 furniture stores to a florist to hobby shops.
6 furniture.
We've not 6. Oh, well, if you count things like This and That Furniture, Danielson's Flooring and Upholstery, Madco, Draperies.
Furniture there on 14th.
Home Life Furniture, Bush Furniture. I got 5 right there. We've got Vintage Shop. There's my 6. And that's surprising. But that's a niche that we'll probably continue to cultivate. Boy, we've got probably a very baseline amount of commercial activity happening. So we're at that threshold. We want to see that go up, because I think the consensus in the community is we want to see more of a retail downtown. That's what I'm hearing. That needs to happen in conjunction with other types of development downtown. Other types of development downtown, that's some of what Urban Renewal Commission needs to be aware of. We want to see mixed use happening in our mixed use district. Okay, Nancy, next slide, please. I mentioned earlier, we got 4 areas we focus on, one being economic development. This lists the goals. Let me condense this for you while you read it. Business recruitment and buildings that are tenable and accessible for new businesses. Those are things we need to focus on with this task force that we have made up of volunteers focusing on these issues. Next slide, please. It already came out, it was announced once tonight. It's worth reiterating that in the middle of a recession, through no fault of my own, probably no fault of Main Street, Oregon City, we had a good win. We had 14 new businesses open up downtown, or in Lee's case, some of them are businesses that would no longer be here if they hadn't have been bought by new owners and repositioned themselves. So a pretty nice list. a good mix. We got the restaurant, we got the creative, we've got a little bit of retail happening. You see that's important to have this mix, so that's very nice, something we should be very proud of. Next slide. Part of our mandate in Main Street, Oregon City is to promote downtown, and we see that through events. We see that through some pretty consistent media attention in the paper and on the TV and on the radio. We see that in the branding we're doing to try and make a unique identity for downtown. So again, we have some soft things. We also have some hard things. The development's a hard issue. The marketing, the branding, the coming to an identity for ourselves and our community, it's a little softer, but that has to be established in order to recruit the businesses we want to see. As Larry mentioned, recruiting a professional office downtown, a campus, they want to see a community that has the amenities they want. They want to see a community that's proud, that has a unique place to do business. Downtown helps us get there. Next slide, please. Design, preservation, and planning. Again, this task force focuses on making downtown a better environment, more pedestrian-friendly, more appealing. Facade grants are relevant to this in a very direct way, as are the streetscape improvements we'll be talking about later. So keep in mind, it's busy. It's busy. Let me summarize what we're doing with the next slide. I'm going to read it because it's worth hearing and reading. A comprehensive approach, in my words, to cultivating commerce, culture, and a sense of community for Oregon City via downtown. I continually want to remind people that this is downtown Oregon City is Oregon City's downtown, not a special. It's a special area, but it's a special area because the community wants it to be special. A couple more slides, then we'll be wrapping up. Important for everybody to know, the public to know, that this is about how our last year's finances shook out. We had some assistance from the city and the county for operating costs. We had that matched and surpassed when we included our local support by downtown property and business owners and residents. When you match that to our grant projects that we're doing, that certainly means the investment from the city is a good return, at least I think. And I'm going to prove that to you in a future slide. We can hit the next slide, though. It just gives you some details on our budget, how we spend money. If we were to ever hit our full budget, we're a ways from acquiring $131,000 in revenue. But were we to do it, that's how we would be spending the money. Slack's name is at the top. I should say this because I stole this PowerPoint slide from a previous presentation in which he presented this information.
This is salary.
Yeah. And let's hit the next slide.
That's the president's salary.
91,000, that must be Don's.
Yeah. That was
Pocket change.
That's for salary, rent, utilities.
Unfortunately, I'm on the other end of one of those numbers.
Right. This slide deserves a little more deliberation from this group. The graph that's attracting everybody's eye is nationwide the return on investment a community experiences when it has a downtown that's got a champion, an organization like Main Street, Oregon City. You see the first couple of years, there's not much happening, but then that increment, and we're all comfortable using that term, you really start to see a return on investment as the downtown becomes a little more vibrant, a little more self-aware. Mind you, in our downtown, we've already had over $1.3 million invested privately last year. $1.3 million of investment in buildings happened privately last year.
You're talking about like retrofitting buildings and
updating buildings, facades.
Facades.
Now, I think the Urban Renewal Commission gave out to downtown about $70,000, maybe $80,000. Maybe it was a little more.
Too much more. There was
chump change compared to the $1.3 million we saw last year. Now, I'm not saying every year we're going to see $1.3 million of investment, but the trend will be toward that. So keep that in mind when we're talking about the budgeted amount that we're putting toward downtown from Urban Renewal Commission.
So you're adding both the public investment and the private investment?
No, the 1.3 I don't think includes the
Urban
Renewal money.
So that's all private?
Mm-hmm. I can double check my numbers.
Yeah, that'd be good.
It's either one, yeah. But I'm pretty sure that was just in building improvements. That doesn't count the new businesses we've added in that bring employees, that bring jobs, that bring business tax, as little as it is. Okay, we're going to end with a couple slides that very visually show us the impact of the Urban Renewal Commission on downtown. We have I would work with Kathy Griffin from the engineering department, to come up with some before and after shots over the years of buildings that Urban Renewal Commission has invested in. Mind you, a $10,000 facade, like you see, usually pays off pretty big dividends. And we have these in hard copy if anybody wants them. This is just a quick glance. There's Hops furniture, Hops upholstery, before and after. Recently completed this year. Oh my gosh, does your jaw just drop?
Yes, yeah, that's a biggie.
That's a biggie. You know, so you're a $10,000 investment from Urban Renewal Commission went well beyond the $20,000 they listed in their grant amount. I promise you, their improvement project was more than a $20,000 project. Let's hit the next one. Here we have Ryan Smith's building, the verdict. I know the number on that, his rehab, and it's well above the $10,000 match toward a $10,000 project. Not to ignore the fact that he added in a downtown location for a federal congressman, which is good for us, as well as 2 restaurants. And I think we might have one more.
Yeah, just give you a quick story. When Nancy and I were at a transportation meeting recently, we're going around the table, and one of the criteria for putting transportation priorities on the federal list is how much does your congressperson, the political support. And so we said, well, ours is on Main Street. It's a Main Street project, and it can't get any closer than that.
And that wasn't by accident. He intentionally wanted to be on.
Oh, and that you really don't underestimate how important that is. So thank you.
So there's a final one. Look at that one. Yeah, pretty powerful. And we've seen another 4 or 5 happen. T5 Equities has done several. The Diamonds have done several. Yeah. So last slide. Let me maybe, in some very conceptual terms, talk about what I see Urban Renewal Commission, how I see Urban Renewal Commission playing a continued role in downtown's success. Both the Urban Renewal Commission and the City Commission over the next, let's say, as short as 2 years. These are pretty quick action items. Main Street Oregon City as a nonprofit that's working toward 501c3 status is a good tool for doing a lot for downtown. If we want to get serious about downtown development and serious about our partnership with potential development outside of downtown, like the Cove and the rivers, we may need to talk about an economic improvement district, a local self-assessment that property owners buy into that says, yeah, we care about our future and we want to take some control of that. That can be a funding mechanism we can do that's initiated by the public, authorized by the city, that is a way to fund activities, something that the Commission and the community really need to think about. But that's based on interest level downtown happening first. If that support comes through, I really need the Urban Renewal Commission and the City Commission aware that this is something that has value. And it becomes another tool for economic development, a way to fund building improvements, fund circulation issues, to fund safety. Those are good programs. The other 2 items, I think, come directly back to the Urban Renewal Commission. Increasing the funding level for facade programs. As we see more activity happening, we see more and more interest in making our buildings better. $100,000 over the whole district, Urban Renewal District, might not be enough given the level of interest we're seeing in downtown. I've got, I think, 2 property owners right now who are ready to move on projects, but they want to know if they can get a little Urban Renewal Commission money to, facade development money to make it happen. And right now we're sitting on our thumbs. I think we put a moratorium on spending money, so I need the Urban...
Spend our budget.
No, there's a little bit left.
A little bit left.
And
they're calling every day.
And my last understanding was this commission was waiting, so I need us to make some decisions to move that forward. The second idea I'd like to propose Urban Renewal Commission can consider, and I'm not sure the amount yet, but I'll come back when I'm done some penciling out, is create a second fund that ties to building development that isn't limited just to facades. Facades are that's the candy, that's the icing on the cake. We, in many cases downtown, have buildings that need a little more support, and maybe it's not external, maybe it's internal. Maybe we have a building that would be well suited for a tenant. We just need to help the developer or the property owner build out some of that building internally. Or, as we saw with the Masonic Temple, potential for a really good building, but it's lacking in some infrastructure that needed some help, a boiler. There's issues where we need to get past just the facade. Let's not be blinded by just facades. Urban Renewal Commission can be sophisticated enough to talk about other projects. Now, these are maybe more expensive projects, but there should be ways to figure out how to get money invested in downtown beyond just windows and awnings. I probably should now wrap up with some kudos and some...
Yes, you should, because actually you don't get until 7:30 just because you started early.
Right. I will wrap up my public presentation by recognizing both Nancy Crushauer and Dan Drentlaw and the projects they're working on behalf of the city with downtown. I'm going to mention them, and they're both going to go into a little more detail. Nancy's going to, I think, spend a couple minutes to talk to you about the streetscape enhancement project that we're talking about for downtown, as well as the progress on the circulation study, two very essential and timely thought processes for us to be going through as a community relevant to downtown. Dan's going to talk about the Metro Development Potentials Grant and the design guidelines that my volunteers have gotten together to craft a series of design recommendations that Urban Renewal Commission might want to consider as they think about the future of the district.
Then I heard the mayor say you could go at least till recess time, which means you've got a whole half hour.
No.
I'm
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
I'm done unless there's questions. Nancy, go ahead.
Before,
Make it be flexible. Sure, Rob.
this is something to think about before I forget, is I know you made sure you asked me for some of these things to think about, but I'd also like us to think about a potential loan program. So it's a loan to help people do some of these developments, but at the same time, it doesn't cost us. We can see that money back and keep reinvesting it and keep re-getting it back, basically. And you can put a lien on the property, so you can, it's a guaranteed loan. But I think that might help to spur more development, especially on buildings like Bank of Commerce. I mean, if they could tear off that ugly tile at the base of their building, if they could get a low-interest loan, or the bushes, if they'd be willing to strip their building and repoint it and get the brick looking good again, or what are some ways that we can encourage that we might have some financial resources that we could do that without severely impacting the budget. And I guess we need to talk about that with Larry. But
could we, in the interest of focus, could I ask if we wish to have the issue of creative financing for Main Street projects, which would include an EID, because I think we need more discussion about what that is and what that means. What's the potential for a loan program and in what forms? What could be the funding tool for complex rehab? So essentially, it would be the topic would be funding, and is there a different way we wish to do it? Is that a topic we're interested in, or you want to flesh that out? Or okay, just picking up on the threads you were kind of all mentioning.
And that was
Okay.
the EID complex rehab.
It's funding, so it's creative sources for loans, facade improvements, EID. Essentially three. Or there are four. It's the funding tool for the complex.
Those three up on the screen
plus loans.
Those three plus loans are the...
Essentially the...
And let me say, too, that Terry has actually, for Main Street General, the research on the EID and stuff.
I think to have that all together as a choice of options and alternatives would be helpful for the way I think, anyway, in a matrix form. Nancy, are you on? No, that's fine. We need to have that kind of conversation. Oh, Jim.
I have two items that I wanted to talk about relating to Main Street.
Why don't you wait a minute? Let's get through the presentational things, and then after the break, then we get into more discussion.
One asked Lloyd, are you here through 9 o'clock? Are you here through the whole thing?
Sure he is.
I was for sure here through 7:30, but if you need me to stay later, date night's done, trust me. So we can talk.
You going to pick his overtime pay up?
Yeah. Let me give some time to Dan and Nancy, because what they're doing is extremely relevant, both the Urban Renewal Commission in the big picture and downtown specifically.
Yeah, and I won't, I'll just give you a quick update on the projects that I'm working on downtown. The first one that Lloyd mentioned is the Main Street Sidewalks project, streetscape project. And we have started the design. We'll be having a public meeting to update the community, particularly stakeholders, of course, on where we're at, and there will be a few decisions to be made amongst that group. And as probably you all know, the city, through its transportation system development charges, is funding the design of the sidewalk project. We're doing the easement acquisitions, the temporary construction easements. We're doing them, volunteers are doing them between Kathy Griffin, who works for me, and Lloyd and Don. They are doing the...
Actually, Kathy has done no.
But talk about saving a whole lot of consulting money. It's really fabulous. And then the...
but, you know, it's been a very good chance to dialogue with building owners.
What specifically are they?
We're calling all the building owners to get the temporary easements for the construction.
You're asking for the permission?
Right.
Oh, okay.
And then
really
Catherine's getting the documents taken care of once we talk to them.
60 of them?
60 property
Oh,
owners
okay.
would like to say yes.
So that, and then we're also working on the funding for construction then, of course. And we've been keeping in very close touch with ODOT. Should there be any additional American Recovery Act funding that becomes available, either that hasn't been spent through the first round, or if there's a second round, ODOT's very much aware of us. And then, and of course, we're aware of them, aren't we? And the other thing that you'll be seeing downtown now, though, is a couple of small utility projects. There's a water line on 8th Street that needs to be replaced, and we're going to do some storm sanitary sewer separation on Main Street. We want to get those done before any sidewalk projects, anything. So those are small works projects, but you'll be seeing those. Those are utility funded. And then, as the mayor mentioned, she and I are also working on funding beyond the American Recovery Act. We are hoping to submit an earmark request to Congressman Schrader for the Main Street sidewalks too. So I think there's good potential there.
It's really better than that, in that we have the blessing so far of the region as the #1 project for Clackamas County.
Right, right.
But, so that should place us, there's tons of competition, but it should place us well.
It should. And what it's good about our project is it's a sidewalk project. It's good for the regional center, which is a Metro 2040 kind of a thought. It's ultimately very good for our downtown. It's good for the Main Street. We have a lot of programs, so it's not just a street somewhere. It has all kinds of very interested parties and fabulous outcomes. So, and then I'll go to the circulation study. What I did was I just summarized some slides that were presented at the large format meeting. Crandall Arambula is the consultant that is doing this project for ODOT, is funding it. We'll be looking at what are the pros and cons of turning Main Street back into a two-way street. And this is a project that we're not only looking at those couple of blocks of Main Street that are one-way, but we're also looking at some of the entrances. We're looking at the railroad. We're looking at the alleyways, trying to get some ideas on how could we make it more pedestrian-friendly, and also make sure that there's good visibility for the businesses, and it's easy to find your way downtown. And we also are, of course, referencing our new parking study so that we can figure out if we lose any parking spaces, how are we going to accommodate those. So it's coming along. We had a lot of activity, a flurry of activity with the stakeholders, and then a large group meeting in the fall. And then the holidays came, and now what they're actually doing is they did their first phase of work. Now they're going to go into their second phase of work, and the staff from the state is working with the consultant and the traffic engineer. That's when they'll bring in a traffic engineer to develop the scope of work for the next steps. And in the handout I gave you, and I'm not going to go through all this, you can look at it at your leisure, but it describes the TGM grant program, which is what's funding the study. It lists the project goals, so everyone knows what those are. And then it it basically just gives a history of what we've done so far. And then I did, like I mentioned, I summarized the presentation that Crandall Arambula gave at the last meeting. And they had some really interesting slides that are just interesting about what makes a downtown successful, and different kinds of retail and commercial and things that are just sort of some technical information that I thought would be interesting to both the City Commission and the Urban Renewal Commission. And then, just so I think it's important to note that they are using past plans that went through a full public process and were adopted by the city as a background for this. So those plans aren't just sitting on the shelf. Of course, we're using some of them with the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan, but they're also being used then to grow into the next step of the downtown planning. And it talks a little bit about if, with the circulation, it has some maps of what the circulation study, if there were changes that were made, what could happen. Talks about the business traffic volumes and what makes for successful business with certain traffic volumes. And then at the end, it does then talk about the next steps. So what you'll be seeing is the consultants will be developing 2 or 3 alternatives for circulation downtown. One of the most important things of that, of course, is going to be the traffic analysis, because we don't really want to cause gridlock downtown by bringing two-way traffic back. And there are some very important intersections that ODOT is going to be very, very interested in making sure they continue to function well. The most important one being 7th and Main Street, which is where the Highway 43 bridge comes over. And that is a terribly congested intersection at PM peak. And that's going to be a difficult one to make changes at, but we'll see how it goes. We have to, of course, engage TriMet, ODOT, and because ODOT owns some of the streets down there, and TriMet has an active role downtown. And then there will be more public meetings. Hopefully everybody will be interested in attending. Then we'll come up with a preferred alternative. We're going to have joint meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Commission for presentation. And in all of this, not only are they studying long-term recommendations, but they're also developing short-term recommendations. So what are some of the things that we might only do while the bridge is closed, or what are some of the things that we would do permanently or long, in 5 years we do this. So that's where we're at with those projects.
So that when somebody comes downtown, they want to do work, that it's a process that isn't too onerous, so they actually are interested in going and following the guidelines. So if you go through those, I'm not going to go through them now, but you can see that there are over 40 criteria in there that address everything from window location, different uses of materials, where doors and entrances should go, how they should be designed, roof lines, plazas, how the building relates to the sidewalk. There's just a ton of detail in there. So one of the things I'm hopeful we can do is take all these guidelines and put it into a simple checklist. So if someone comes along and they're interested in applying for a storefront grant and they realize they have to meet this criteria, they can just start ticking the issues off and go through those. So that's a further step that I think we need to do for the design guidelines. Another question that Lloyd alluded to, and I think makes a lot of sense, is the possibility of increasing the grant amount, because right now we have a cap of $10,000. We have a potential for some really large buildings, 4-story buildings. The Masonic building is over 40,000 square feet. It would be really easy to spend over $10,000 or 20,000 on that. And so the thought is, if we have these design guidelines institutionalized and someone meets those, well, then maybe there's ability to go into a much higher amount for a grant. And then the reverse of that is if you have a very small project, maybe it's only $500 or $100 or $1,000, maybe there's an exemption clause, so you don't have to go through it. So, I mean, my intent is to make them thorough, but also pretty relatively easy to use. And another thought we had was that perhaps we could have a list of pre-qualified architects. So if a potential developer or builder used that list, then the process would be much easier. So those are some of the things that we're looking at with the design guidelines. And then in terms of some other initiatives, one thing that we've been working with Metro on is what's called development opportunity grants. This is I think a really great program with Metro because it's easy. You don't have to go through a big pre-qualification process. They've already said that they're interested in giving us a grant for $30,000. And what we would use that money for is to do a development and market feasibility analysis for sites downtown that we think make good potential redevelopment sites. There are two caveats to the program. One is the sites have to be owned by the city or the Urban Renewal Agency, and that we use a pre-qualified list of consultants. They have a pre-qualified list of market analysts, transportation planners, and designers that looks really good. So we're hoping to come to you, to the Urban Renewal Commission, with some specific sites. We're potentially looking at the site on Main Street and 10th that's now used as informal parking as a possible site.
It's a cemetery, you know that, or it was a cemetery.
No, I didn't.
Well, I've brought that up on numerous. I was absent on the meeting that it really got talked about, but I brought it up at a commission meeting after that. That is the site of the old Catholic cemetery before it was moved up on the hill, and the first site of the first Catholic church west of the whatever. So we got to be careful with that place, possibly. Huh?
I mean,
well, if you know as good as I do how records were kept with cemeteries at that point in time. So it needs.
Building there too, though. Denise McGriff.
I have no idea, but I just throwing it out there. Make sure we.
It was the Enterprise.
The Enterprise building.
Yeah.
and then the other site is the vacant lot the city owns on 99E and 14th, which I think is a pretty good site. It's the KFC is on the other side.
Which side of the street on Main Street on 10th? At the bottom of the hill or across the street?
Right next to Hops.
Okay, well then that's the Enterprise building. I'm talking about the lot. The lot that I was referring to was talked about in another meeting, which is the parking lot there in the corner on the other side.
The dentist building?
Yeah, I mean that was talked about in general visions for the future of Main Street, not in any.
And then the only other thing I wanted to mention briefly is the city did apply for a DLCD grant, Department of Land Conservation and Development, for $130,000. It doesn't look too promising. I talked to the state, and they received $5 million worth of grants, and they only have $1.7 million to award. So we're waiting to see if we can get any of that money. But the idea on that grant was to look at not only downtown, but the whole regional center, and take a look at what sort of market feasibility there is for helping develop the north end between downtown and the Cove and the rivers, and even look at what sort of impact the rivers and the Cove would have on downtown, and out of that come up with a real specific implementation program for actually funding potential projects. So that was the intent of that grant, and it was also an intent to get some consensus within the community as to where we want to focus urban renewal monies. We have a lot of projects, but where do we want to prioritize those investments? So hopefully we'll hear from that. And then also in here, as I mentioned, are several other discussions of some other economic development programs, but that doesn't relate specifically to downtown, and we can cover that at a later point.
I don't want to lose that last sentence that you have there either, about the reallocation of our concept plan funding,
right.
because that's probably just for city commission, but I think that's an important discussion. So
I mentioned that to Metro. We had, as part of the concept planning.
You can say that later if you want.
Okay.
Downtown.
I want to raise an issue, Dan, because one of the last points you mentioned was the area between downtown and the north end and the Rivers area. At our last retreat, we gave direction to have David Leland do exactly that, and he's given us 1 or 2 reports on the Urban Renewal Commission. How does what you're talking about with Metro fit in with what Dave Leland was assigned? Are these going at cross purposes? Are they complementary? Do we need to really sit down and I mean, determine who's doing what on that and where we're going on that?
Well, the first grant is property specific.
The development opportunity.
Yeah, the development opportunity grant. So that's where we can look at that lot that we own on 99E and 14th and say, what's the feasibility? What's the highest and best use for this? What would make sense? Could the location and the site profitably fund a 4-story retail on the first floor and office above? And so that gives us some real specific marketability information that we could use. It's sort of ahead of our schedule, but the grant money is available now, and I think it would be helpful as sort of a check on what market realities we have in that area. So that's the development opportunity grant, and it looks like we have that for sure, and that's the $30,000. The second and separate issue I mentioned was the DLCD grant. And if we get that money, the thought is that could be a continuation of that, actually more detail of the work that Leland's done. I think what you've seen from David Leland's work is some suggested land uses, but what this could do is go more into the market feasibility and the actual financing of some projects. So I don't necessarily see them as conflicting, but just continuing that work.
Thank you.
I guess my question sort of relates to Jim's question a little bit, in that we've all stated, I'm not sure we stated it as a body, but we've all stated we really want to see housing downtown. I mean, if we're zoned for mixed use. Mm-hmm. And so where is the point where we formalize that desire? Is it through a market study that comes back and says, yeah, this is a great spot? Or do we say, find a great spot, that's a policy of the Urban Renewal Commission?
It's a combination of both. First, you have to say what it is you want and where you think you want it, and then I think we need to test that with some market realities.
Okay, Jim?
Let me please tap onto that, and then to clarify. My understanding is that this Metro's site-specific exploring development opportunities grant would allow us to say, please tell us if financially residential would work downtown at that site. And the concept would be, if we think it can work at that site, well, then it bears potentially repeating. They might show us numbers, and we'll realize, nope, we'd like to see residential happening, but we're just not going to get the rents. Downtown our community isn't there yet. So in that it's been the implicit request of the city or the community to look into residential, this grant could help us get a little more specificity on that. And then we come back. And so it's an iterative process. That's my approach. I think where Dan and I are working on. I have some other thoughts.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did, but that's all right.
You're first.
On that score, I mentioned briefly with Lloyd that I would really like to see a very in-depth market study of lofts. And I don't mean like condo lofts like you have in the Pearl District, but the traditional New York-style lofts as a potential beyond just residential development for an economic engine in downtown Oregon City to use with a historic investment tax credit for some of our buildings downtown. And I don't know if that kind of market analysis is in any of the grants that you're talking about. If it's not, I'd like to put that kind of market study on the table.
Well, I think what then the
As a piece.
Yeah, in the development opportunity grant, that's what we
Should be
can
there, yeah.
do, is we can say, we want to see if this site could support that use. And it'll give us some useful information if the market's there.
But I guess, but what I'm looking for, though, wouldn't be eligible for the grant you're talking about, because I don't think what I'm thinking of would, I'm not thinking on something on a vacant lot where you build something new that happens to be a loft style. That's what I'm talking about, is downtown in the Pearl District. What I'm talking about is older buildings, because we have a bunch of them downtown with, little used or unused space upstairs that I want to see used in combination with the historic investment tax credit. And I could roll off a number of the, the buildings downtown that I think could do that. But, so I given that the parameters for the Metro grant you're talking about is, something that has to be owned by the city or the Urban Renewal Agency, and generally those are vacant lots downtown. But what I'm talking about is something that doesn't fall under that, so I think it would have to be a separate piece.
The study has two parts. Tests, it gauges how much demand and what that demand is for residential, and that would be unanimous or systemic across all of downtown, loft or not loft. So we can use that data again and again. Now, I think if the commission wants to commission a study just to focus on that specific issue, you may want to do that just specifically. I think getting this done first would help us be a test.
How about
so does that make sense? There's two parts to the market study.
Yes.
Both what it costs to do the build-out and what it costs to do a build-out on a
Specific.
greenfield or brownfield or shovel-ready site is different than what it costs to rehab a building. That's one part of the study. The second part is gauging residential demand downtown. So
Since we don't have a funding mechanism for that, I don't know who's taking notes on our spreadsheet here, but could we place that, can we place that in the parking lot so that we can talk about that later? We kind of have some consensus around this. And Dan, I know you're probably on topic here too, but on this, do you want more discussion to continue about what elements we'd like to inquire about for this particular grant, or is this not the time?
I think I'd probably want to bring it back to you with a little more specifics.
So we can frame it better. Okay. Doug?
I think it's on topic, but the point is, part of this, of course, is even though we'll go through another goal-setting position, this is also a goal-setting period that we're talking about. And when we talk about the lofts or downtown, I think it's been mostly focused on Main Street. You've got that area, 14th, 15th, around Washington. It's in a floodplain. It's near railroad tracks. We've talked about affordable housing. It may be an area in which higher value entities don't want to come in because of those challenges of train noise, maybe a bit of vibration, and because of flood potential. But I think we need to include the affordable housing piece in there, and it might work quite well there.
Sure, jump in.
As a building owner downtown, I own, with a partner, Chris, the McCall building, which was built to City Hall in 1925. Now, upstairs is where the offices of the city manager were, and Chris and I, my partner and I, talked about possibly doing some residential up there, turning that into a loft. It's about 1,000 square feet. The reason we didn't was the fear of the unknown. We don't know SDCs, if there's any regulations like on having to do sprinklers, if there's, do we have to put an elevator in, where are people going to park? So I think there would be people open to it. It's just, it's the chicken or the egg. I mean, do we really want to spend all that time? And we probably can't get any more rent for that as residential as we can office.
Okay, may I then put the second thing on the books? Okay, we have, the first one is the financial tools. The second one, I think, that sounds like we're interested in at least a few, so testing the water here, is the whole housing downtown piece. So if we wish to do housing down piece, how do we do it? What codes and requirements need to be either barriers removed or new standards raised? Feasibility of it, what type of housing, what mix, So I think that topic is, I mean, they're all related, but to delve into that specifically under housing would be good. Any disagreement or more chiming in on that? Okay, we kind of have two areas to explore. Okay, continue.
That's all I had.
That's all you had on this? Okay.
I told you get till, I told you get till 45, didn't I?
Oh, I failed to see. Okay, we're on break till 7. Check and make sure your microphones are on before you speak.
I know, but you know, people could have.
Don't be turning them off. Does everyone have their lights? Have your attention, please.
Yeah.
Okay, make sure your lights are back on your microphones, and we're ready to go since we're being video streamed this evening. Picking back up again, I wanted to circle back and try to make sure we don't have loose ends here that we inquire about later. So my question to Larry was, we've been handed the downtown research's design standards. Where do we go next?
That's a topic for work session. You wanted to kind of focus on those individually, I think. So we want to get those to you. And again, if you got questions, that we can answer them. But I don't know if unless you want to go through them now.
You want to say, Daphne?
Clarification. When we talk, I'm sorry, I have my mouth full. Design standards, we talked about two different processes in my mind, but maybe I'm confused and maybe it's one. We talked about design standards for urban renewal grants, and then we were talking about general design standards for Main Street, Oregon City. So what is being presented tonight?
These are and Rob, correct me if I think these are the design standards for Main Street, which I think you had tied back. That's what you were going to use for the grant guidelines as well.
We were, okay. For some reason, okay.
Well, I think our intention was we would do the full-blown design guidelines, that then we would create a checklist for the Urban Renewal Commission when the Urban Renewal Commission was reviewing things, and we've kind of started that, if you look on page 6 and 7, your checklist for a successful project, and it basically lists 12 things, such as compatible with zoning codes. Does it? One of the things we wanted to make sure was that you at least look at historic photos of what the building used to look like before you start on a project. Stuff like, do you use materials that are complementary to what would be appropriate for the downtown area? And then basically you just have a pass-fail, and as an Urban Renewal Commission, we could go through and say, yep, this passes, this passes, this passes. There might be one thing that fails, but if the Urban Renewal Commission decided that was okay because they had some reason for that, then we would be fine with that. But basically what it does for the applicant, too, is it gives them a checklist. Say, look, as long as you get all these passes, you have a really good chance of getting your project funded. And for us as the Urban Renewal Commission, it gives us something that's a very clear guideline of what we're looking for. So what we would need to make sure is that the Urban Renewal Commission agrees with the design guidelines that Main Street is providing, as well as agrees with the checklist that's being built off those guidelines.
Go ahead, Daphne first.
So, are you asking for us to look through them all tonight and go through them and yay or nay, or?
No, I think tonight's a process question.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to make sure that we have good direction to staff on what we want to do. So right now what I'm hearing is that that we have a design evening where we talk about the meshing of the two. We talk about them individually and then decide whether or not we want to mesh them. That's not been done, and then they need to be adopted by the Urban Renewal Commission.
So I'm hoping that they're all kind of incentives. So that's, I haven't read through them yet, so it's great. So if what we want to encourage, we're going to incentivize the grant for. So that's just great. Okay. I haven't looked through them, but
I think we need to polish them up a little bit before we get to a formal discussion.
Okay, we're good. That's.
So we want to present these as were and get feedback from anyone and everyone, and we'll have a timeline. Look, you need to get feedback within a certain time, and then we need to move forward and fill out the imagery that we need, like recommended, not recommended for awnings, or recommended, not recommended for signage, or
So you're,
so on and so forth.
you're actually not ready for presentation yet?
We wanted to present this as a first draft and say, we want your feedback, and then we'll do a final draft, in which case then we would build the checklist questions off of that.
Rocky?
Okay, so, and I've just skimmed through this, and actually a lot, what I've looked at looks good, but that's not completely, I was going to ask the exact same question, because to me, this wasn't necessarily the storefront design guideline standards, that this was a separate thing, but now it sounds like they're kind of intertwined, which is, I guess, fine, but that is not the direction I remember. I won't speak to the direction I remember that we talked about, but I'm going to go back and look at the minutes, because I remember us discussing creating a subcommittee of the Urban Renewal Commission to revise the guidelines, one that was going to be chaired by myself. And then, so how did this get diverted to Main Street?
It was worked on by Main Street before that was even discussed.
Yeah.
They've been working over a year on it.
Right. So how does these two directions coexist, and how come I'm completely lost?
Nancy?
Yeah, I think I was also involved. I was pointed out to be involved in that subcommittee, and I think the way that I envision this working is that this would be a component of a checklist, because, for example, we might want to look at some other factors, like, for example, one factor that we haven't discussed, but when we have the discussion about the criteria, we might want to look at, is it a one-for-one match of dollars? Are we looking at a, $1 for every $2 of private investment? I mean, those could be factors that would be other components in addition to the design checklist that would be one feature of the checklist that the Urban Renewal Commission would use for its storefront criteria for the storefront grants.
I would like to say that I think one of the values of a retreat like this is that we actually, if we wish to, can throw out what happened in the minutes, and we can create a new process if we, with the information that exists today, or we can go on that same route. So I think what's important here is, what process do we want to follow? I mean, we're going to have two pieces of information, and how do we get to where we want to go?
Well, I would make a simple suggestion, if I might, and that is let the subcommittee actually look at this first.
Right. Well, I mean, our previous design standards were brought in when this was created as a guideline for that, right? And so this wasn't created separately from that. I mean, am I right on that? I don't know, because this is the first I heard about this tonight. I didn't really know that that the Main Street was working on this separately. I didn't know that.
You mentioned that in several meetings.
My recollection was...
But not in terms of design standards, yes, but not in terms of storefront grant design standards. It's two separate things. It's never been mentioned to me at all. The last Urban Renewal Commission that I remember was I'll go back and watch all the minutes to see how it actually went. But I don't mind going a different direction. I just think that they need to be that the discussions that we've had with the other guidelines need to be intertwined with this. And since I haven't read this, I have no idea if that took place at all or not. So I think that's what we have. So now we take this time.
Your committee to do what you've got to do.
So now we go through this and we combine the two, or we figure out what.
Okay, so
I'm just clarifying because no one's kept me in the loop.
Right. Well,
let's
let's further clarify that then. So the subcommittee, because I missed that meeting where that was formed, and so I've forgotten. Is it more than just the two of you? Who's on the subcommittee?
Just the two of you.
Just two.
Okay, so the two of you, your task was to sit down and review the storefront grant guidelines. Okay, so then, is this a process that you can endorse? So that happens, then that gets all cleaned up and is presented. Well, actually, what I would love, if I were Queen of the World, would be to have one topic to really be able to go into in-depth, like design standards of an evening. And there may be some other business we have to do, but one discussion item I think would be so helpful. Perfect. For the Urban Renewal Commission.
And I think so too, to some degree, that these all merge together as one overarching guidelines, and that the signs fall into this, and that the building sign that they all fall into the same category.
Let's get them coordinated. Tony was going to head next.
And I guess I was more just clarifying that this is going to be, these design guidelines in whatever finished project or however we get there become for the grant process, and from a land use perspective for any new building, any improvements that go in downtown, that they are just for guidance. They're not a regulatory tool, correct? Right. Okay.
I want to apologize because I was under the impression that Urban Renewal was waiting on the design committee of Main Street for this. I was under the impression that...
I think we were.
Okay.
That was mentioned.
But what I'm hearing now is that there was a subcommittee that was going to do it, so I apologize if I misunderstood. But I agree. I think the subcommittee should take a look at this and coalesce with the existing guidelines, and let's make one document, and I'm sure it's going to be a living document. I'm sure there'll be changes, but then if we can develop a checklist off of that, that'll make it so much easier for applicants. They can have all of this, that they can read it, but they can also just go through the checklist and say, yep, I got this, I got this.
The design committee struggled a lot.
We struggled a ton with...
Do we make it,
details.
just a few pages with a checklist, or do we need the detail there? And so this is kind of the final, at least first draft of trying to do both
Big
of those.
thing, yeah.
Big job. I'm impressed with the work you've completed to date. Daphne?
It was my understanding that both of these things were happening. In fact, I was even wondering tonight if we were going to get a report from Nancy and Rocky on how their design guidelines had, or not the design, but how the draft storefront grant guidelines were going. So this is a perfect thing. We'll make it a topic and integrate these design standards, hopefully, into what other suggestions and issues you had with the storefront grants, and then we'll look at it all at one night. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. So following the subcommittee, then, and the completion of that review, then those presentations will be scheduled.
But we will be looking forward to revisions that you think are necessary from Rocky and from Nancy.
And of course, anything that helps to integrate the two are perfectly welcome, I think, for us to talk about. Doug?
Follows that same thing. If I'm understanding, the subcommittee is going to meet, and then this or those, depending on how it comes out, will come to us. I think the subcommittee should be encouraged to invite certain members of the group that made this after they had a chance to review it and have discussions ahead of time that might facilitate the deliberation of the whole commission.
I think that a subcommittee should never overlook any resources that are available to them. Done.
I don't think you can do that because I think the other part ties to it. So hopefully this package now, put in the hands of the subcommittee, is going to tie both of them together. But what we want is urban renewal buy-in for the overall guidelines
at the end.
As well.
Yeah, that's the goal. I think thank you for stating that goal, because I think it's really clear that that's where we're trying to go, or here, wherever it is. Okay, staff have direction they need on that? Any questions from anyone? Okay.
Do we need to have a timeline, a milestone?
That might not be a bad idea. Like a quarter, maybe the first quarter of the year? Or?
Are we waiting on this to even look at more funding?
You are.
We are?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously sooner.
Probably needs to happen as soon as possible.
I guess one of the other things we discussed when the subcommittee was formed is whether we wanted to only review applications at regular intervals as opposed to when they come in. So that's another part of the discussion.
Well, if we're going to hold them all, yeah.
Well, I mean, we could do it.
That's a different topic called grant program. And because I think the design standards, of course, are a part of that, but I see that as a bigger topic. So I think, the way the grant program functions. Yeah.
And meeting the criteria, and then, when do these grants get reviewed and approved? So, I mean, I think there would be some benefit with the competition for dollars. I would like to be able to rank these grants, if we're doing them twice a year or 4 times a year, I would like to be able to stack them, and say, well, rather than them coming in, it's like, well, the one that comes in at the end might be the best one of all. But, if we were to do it in 2 phases, like twice a year, and do half of our grant monies, or even, 60% or whatever the first part of the year, for the summer months, if we reviewed them in March, for example, then, we would be able to kind of evaluate them against each other. And that might be useful. So those are things that, we kind of haven't been able to, we haven't devoted the time, but those are discussions that would go around this whole grant program as well as the process.
And I think, yes, as far as the process goes, to talk about the grant program in that way also is, I think, a good use of a volunteer's time to do it in 2 lumps. Because, well, one of the problems I see now is that we have them on an agenda, and then we have some other meaty topics, and we've often put the grants off, which is really disrespectful to a grantee. And so I think to be able to know that, June 30th we're going to review, and December 1 we're going to review, and maybe, I think we probably need to come back and talk about process as a topic too, but let's bat it around here because there may be some other nuances we want to get on the table.
I think it's really important that you do it often enough, because if you've got somebody who's motivated to do this, and they're ready to spend money, and they have money to do it,
they got to wait 6
you wait
months.
too long.
6 months,
right?
They're not going to do it.
It's
unless you can
deterrent,
Unless you can make it so it could be retroactive. So if somebody did it and followed the guidelines, that we could retroactively reimburse.
I think it's a good idea to group them, but they
But
need
how?
groups.
The spirit of that is fantastic because you can rate them, but the realities of development are.
I think we have to make that work, so that's part of the discussion. Did you have more?
Well, that was it. I just want to make sure.
Any other wants to chime in on process issues?
And anybody who else wants to participate, I think, is, I don't know what the public meetings law requires if there's more than 2 of us.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. We can get time.
Okay, discussion for a
Because
timeline.
unfortunately,
Yeah, I
I was
think
just telling Doug, with the RFPs from the EOTIC coming to my pile, and I'm still going through city manager applications.
that's really a lot.
It's a big pile, but
Is there a little more work that the Main Street group wants to do on this, or are they ready to?
Really, we've been working on it for a year. We need to get some images and/or do some illustrations, which is time and potentially money that we were thinking about if we wanted to spend that money out of Main Street's meager / non-existent budget.
I thought that you said that you were in a public comment period. So when's the end of that? That you were out soliciting comments for this?
Well, that's for the Urban Renewal Commission that we wanted the comments. But if the subcommittee, if the subcommittee's going to take it, then
we don't need to. Okay, Daphne.
Rocky, I'd be more than happy to try pick up the slack on that, but you were the one that I know it. No, but let me finish. But I don't know what your concerns are. So you were the one that had the most concerns.
I think you know what my concerns were.
Well,
pretty clear.
I really don't know what each one of your concerns were, so I don't know
I
how
sent
we
it
can
out
do.
in an email, actually, to everybody, and we talked about it, so I don't know how you wouldn't know that.
Yeah, it's hard for someone else to represent,
Yeah, I mean,
So
if we can, is it possible to have it done in a month?
The only reason we put it off is because we don't have money to give out for grants, so I didn't feel like, we have short of
Which is
10,000.
which is fine.
We didn't have money. We had like
we have about 18,000.
It's gone up
We have
since.
some people who are interested, so.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, but that hasn't been passed along to me.
Well, I hate to push if we can't push it. So if we could do it by the end,
I can commit to March 1 if you think we can get together.
All right, let's commit to March 1, so then likely it would be ready for an urban renewal meeting in the month of March, if possible. There'll be some staff work in that too. So that's a tentative timeline then? Is that agreeable? Okay. And knowing that, we've got disturbances in the force field, I think Larry didn't emphasize strongly enough, I think, that in the transition, in both the hiring and in the integration of a new city manager, there will be a ton of demands on the five of us time. And so that may slow things down. It may slow staff down a little bit, too, as they're doing other things. So, and that happens in every transition. So just be aware of that may slip a little, so.
Part of that March 1 deadline, just to manage expectations, is that going to be a document that you guys will have already looked at both and coalesced both of them, that we could all look at it as a group and say, yeah, this looks good, just a couple tweaks here and it's done? Or is it we've looked at it and there's still a lot of work to do?
I think that's probably open, but I think we're hoping that it could be your first.
I have a vision.
Yeah, Nancy.
My vision is that we would modify the existing document, and then I would like to see a checklist score sheet that would have the criteria. You know, we talked about this before, that we would really like to have the criteria on the front of the. So when we're viewing applications, that we would be able to have an independent scoring, and then have a better understanding about where does this rank in terms of our overall criteria and values. So I would say that it's going to look pretty similar. I'm guessing it's going to look pretty similar to what we currently have, except that we'll have some discussion about changes, and then we would have an additional piece that would be kind of an evaluation checklist that would help us rank our projects a little bit more with a little bit more refinement, hopefully.
Okay. Who's the staff that's going to help put this together? Are you, Dan? Okay. Great. So the three of you then are in concert with this.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. Go forth and produce.
So last thing.
Sorry, I'm expired. Cold staff.
Gosh, at least you didn't say wrong. So does that mean we're holding any grant requests off till March 1st? Do we have applications now, Ms. Crushart?
No, we're not taking any applications.
I thought you said, or Dawn did you say?
We froze the application.
We get phone calls.
We froze them.
That's not too long.
Okay, that's fine. No, I thought maybe there were some. So if there isn't, no problem. We can just say March 1st. That's easy. That's easy.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay, any other discussion on this? All right, let's move then back to Larry. And I think you're going to bring us
about three things a little bit. I want to reiterate the fire annexation stuff. I think it's important we keep that before us. I want to talk a little bit about mission, the vision and the mission, and talk about those directional questions some, and I think that ties into everything that you're doing here. And then you can go at it
the last
whenever you want to.
9.
I've handed out to you the fire annexation pledge and kind of what's in there, and let me just kind of run through that. And again, the key component here is, because I think it's a crucial definition, particularly when we're looking at things that are more than what we had outlined. Yeah, it's in your packet too. It's the same thing. It's on page 30. Is any addition, is it a maintenance issue, or is it a new program? And you can see the annexation pledge was pretty specific in terms of what we said we were going to do, but you still have some flex. The other thing, though, the plan was based on a number of assumptions, and let me kind of give you the status where those at. Population growth, it was based on 2.5%, and Tony, I think we're growing about 1.5% right now. Is that what population numbers?
Less than that.
Less than that. It's dropped even further than, okay. And that's that has some implications, well, for the general fund, because that could have a bearing on assessed value. I'll mention that. It definitely has implications in the utility fund, because each of those had I think a 3% growth, what those long-range forecasts look like. So, but again, it does reduce demand, so there's a little bit of a balancing in that. In regards to the AV growth, the assessed value growth, the plan was based on a 5.5% growth. I think the first year we were at 6.25%, and then last year we were at 4.25%. So this thing may even out, and we'll see. I don't have the figures for what we're looking at next year, but that, again, hopefully we'll stay somewhere in there. In terms of cost control, I mentioned it. We're 6% for personnel services, and we've been running a little bit below that. 3% for materials and services, and we've been bumping up a little bit above that, I believe, and then 2% for capital, and that's not the capital improvement program. That's any equipment and things of that nature, stuff we're buying, and we're running pretty close to that, occasionally up, occasionally down on that sort of stuff. You'll see at the bottom of that, we talked about doing some other things in the general fund. One of the things we've done is in the budget, we implemented the pavement maintenance utility fee, and that's helping in the street fund. That takes some pressure off what happens with those budgets if they begin to fail. Now, a couple of things could happen as we look at next week. If both those measures go down, what's going to happen with state shared revenues is anyone's guess, but there's a good chance we'll be competing very vigorously for those dollars.
Can you just quickly summarize what those are?
Yeah, well, there's really four major ones. There's cigarette and liquor tax. There is some
911.
Yeah, that's not not too big one, but it's
but it's in there.
It's in there. Yeah.
Liquor tax, gas tax, cigarette tax.
Cigarette, liquor, and what's the other one?
Gas.
In the general fund?
No, there's just three.
Revenue sharing, yeah. And then gas tax is the big one, and I don't know if they're going to attack that one or not, but that could be. Yeah. Yeah.
911, cigarettes and liquor.
But gas tax is our real big. The other, liquor and cigarette tax go into the general fund. Of course, the street goes into the streets department. I don't think they're going to. I haven't heard whether that's really going to be under attack or not. But that gas tax, yeah. So we'll see. Again, as you begin to think about what you're going to talk about in those adjustments, one of the things that is going to have to kind of go through a new manager, because this is going to be kind of foreign concept, some of this stuff, as they talk through that. But more importantly, I think what the mayor said, there will be a lull on a couple of fronts. It's just trying to walk into a city as city manager, and particularly one that's got this thing going on this. The first thing when you first walk in the door, you know everybody in the building knows more about what's going on than you do, including the janitor. And it takes you a while to get into that. And one of the things you really want to do if you want this person to be successful, what they're cast into those first few weeks, if there's a lot of contentious stuff going on, a lot of debating going on, is they can get off to a rugged start and never recover. So you want to try to have the waters as calm, and it needs to be that way for a few weeks as they kind of get into that. They're also going to need to take time, get introduced to the community, introduced to the staff, get a handle on issues. So a lot of your agenda is going to slow down, or should slow down. If you're trying to force everything at them, asking for a lot of stuff being turned out, a person will be pulling their hair out in short order. But
and there's one other thing. This new person will come in right in the middle of budget season.
Yeah.
So that's
going
to be a big...
I did. This happened in the first week.
Hey, when I first met him, I had pigtails and freckles.
We don't want to talk about those days. Okay, moving on. Let me talk about a couple things. And this is important when we're talking about urban renewal or whether we're talking about the city. And we don't spend much time chatting about these, but I think you have to focus in. And it may be one of the things you want to talk about, whether this is it or not. First of all is the vision, which is to reestablish Oregon City's historic role as a regional hub. Now that is a short sentence, but has a very powerful statement that has a lot of impacts. A regional hub is an active place. It has lots of different uses, and it also, that goes along with that 2040 designation that we have under Metro, and what all you have to kind of bring to be that. So, you know, you want to, it's up there also on the commission goals as well, up at the top. So, you know, is that where we're going to go? And you'll hear a lot of folks that are arguing, you know, we don't want to be a regional center. Now, the reality is you can say, I don't want to be a regional center. Probably you're going to be anyhow. You have the college here, you have the hospital here, you have those sorts of things going on.
County seat.
Yeah, the county seat. So a lot of cities try to be things that they're not, and what you really have to do is look at what you are and be what you are, but a lot of folks fight that, and that's going to have impacts in terms of transportation, traffic congestion, impacts on neighborhoods as things develop in and around them, where you place things, and we've seen all that in this last year. And as the city grows and gets bigger, that's only going to take more time and be more contentious, and again, you have to look at it beyond specific concerns to what is in the best interest of the city as a whole, and that cuts across in terms of what's being provided, what the cost of it are, all those sorts of things. And so you might also, from a city commission point of view, you have to think, too, about how you're organizing some of these issues. A lot of it is focused around neighborhood associations, which tend to take a neighborhood view, and you're going to have to balance that between the needs of the individual and the needs of the whole. Very tough balancing act.
One is, of course, from the possibility of getting funding, being a regional center, we have opportunity to more funds than we would otherwise.
Yeah.
Our regional center, though, in terms of what we fund in our regional center, is not the whole city.
No.
And most of those neighborhoods aren't in the regional center. I mean, I understand the traffic concerns and everything is going to be there, but
it spills over through your
and I understand that. But in a sense, on a budgetary issue, they're really two. I think there's somewhat different needs that are there.
And I would posit that this doesn't mean regional center. It can, but I think it can mean many other things. It could be a regional repository of green building practices. It could be a lab for something else. I think that it could. Oh, shut up!
I was thinking in Metro speak.
No, Metro speak, but we said regional hub here, and when we shortened it. When we described it, we talked about a center for tourism, which isn't in Metro speak. We talked about the things that were traditionally here, transportation and industry, commerce, tourism, and anyway. So, but I think you ask a very good question. Is that really where we want the vision to be? Because it's certainly what we've been talking about for the last 7 years, Doug.
But I think we've got to distinguish between the we's here. If we're talking about the Urban Renewal Agency.
This is the vision for the city.
Yeah, I understand that. Mm-hmm. And but the point is, the planning for the Urban Renewal Agency and the monies that are allocated out of that are focus. And I think we got to keep that in mind.
Yes, no,
My only debate is whatever, though, the Urban Renewal Commission is doing and trying to create for the Urban Renewal District should tie to the overall plan for the city. So
Sure.
If you look at the mission, too, the mission says to build a sustainable community that promotes public health, safety, economic growth, and protects livability, environment, and uniqueness in this historic place. That is, in itself, that's an interesting balance in that. If you tie that to the vision, is you can't accomplish all those things, but it does take, it's an interesting debate to try to accomplish all those things, and you're going to get a lot, and the clearer that becomes in terms of what you mean by all this, it's going to tie back into one of these directional questions in regards to alignment, not only among yourselves, but alignment with the community in terms of moving issues forward. So let me turn to those questions.
Let's see if there's any additional comment on that. Now's the time. Okay. Nancy.
We don't have the book, so are we talking about these goals or?
Yeah, but it's the top two there, the vision and the mission.
Okay.
Those two elements of it.
But these are city commission goals, not urban renewal commission?
Well, the vision and the mission is really for the city, which urban renewal district is part of. And again, so whatever you're trying to do with that should match. Because if you're trying to do something different with urban renewal development that is not going where the city's trying to go, you probably need to iron out what those differences are. Because it all should mesh in terms of how we create the community.
One of the problems, the challenges that we've had over the last years is that we established the goals, and in an ideal world, all of our advisory committees would have their goals in alignment. They would fit into the objectives that we set, and we would all be working on the same page. Well, for multiple reasons, which you probably all know, often the committee will go off over here, and we haven't established strong mechanisms for pulling everybody under the same umbrella of goals. And I think goal setting is truly a roadmap for where the city goes. And so at our retreat, it's a good time to check, is this still where we want to go? Is this still what we want to do? And I really think these are very powerful statements when you look at the words. A sustainable community, that is such huge implication, not just for longevity, but for, honoring the environment. And then, it talks about, the typical mission of the city, but also, another powerful word is uniqueness. And we don't want to be a cookie-cutter city like everybody else. So we want to honor the uniqueness and our history, as well as the environment and livability. So I think it's a pretty broad. I would disagree with Larry that it needs to be more specific. I think it needs to be broad, but with very powerful words, because it is what I look to when I want to know what the values of the community are. Nancy.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about this, but...
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
Sylvester, this is the last topic.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess, my thought is that, I really agree with Goal 1 being build a sustainable future. Where I get a little bit lost is that, you talk about uniqueness and... you've got a Center Cal which wants to imprint, a corporate vision on Oregon City, as opposed to Oregon City saying, this is what our city is, this is what characteristics we want to retain, and invite people to come in and adapt to our vision, as opposed to them establishing a vision for us. That's one point. And then another point is, appreciate all of the support. I know a lot of people from the city have been participating in the Housing Authority of Clackamas County is looking at redeveloping the property in Park Place neighborhood, Clackamas Heights. And, last night I was in a discussion with Daphne where they're asking a question, when do we go off the grid? When can, their idea of sustainability is so much different than, let's continue to reduce our carbon footprint. Those are kind of where I would like to see our discussion talking about, particularly with respect to the Rivers project. Where is our local business factor? I mean, can we establish a requirement for having local incubator projects, or can we impose some of our vision and our goals onto these projects, as opposed to saying, well, we'd just love to have a Bridgeport here. I mean, I don't feel that Bridgeport satisfies my my vision of uniqueness for Oregon City. I see, real opportunity for commerce, with the rivers or for some of these other projects. But I would really like to see us have some kind of a target, as opposed to just, filling in the puzzle pieces with different, kind of unrelated businesses and investors. And I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if this is the right time to say it or not, but that would be my thought as far as our goals and objectives.
Contribution. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Exactly. It's a great segue. And do you want to? Oh, Rocky.
I was just going to, I think I agree with that, too. It's not, I think sometimes when there's a disconnect, it isn't so much that the disconnect is that we're working towards a different vision or different mission. We just have, there's different perspectives on how we get to that. Because I read these, and this is what I follow. But my way of getting here may not necessarily be the same as anyone else's way to getting here. So I don't think it's so much that the disconnect is happening with the vision and the mission. It's just how we're getting to that point.
Yeah, I can empathize with your sentiments. The problem that Oregon City has is it's not simply serving Oregon City, it's basically serving Malala, Beaver Creek, and so on. And the fact of the matter is there are people that are going to major centers all over the place from this area as well. And in terms of some degree, in terms of sustainability, is it better that they actually go to a shorter distance to get those services versus going a longer distance to get those services? And I don't know, it's a real balancing act. I don't know how you do it. But I mean, the thing I would do maybe in terms of design, if in fact there are monies that essentially we're going to essentially fork over at the end of the process on the Rivers project. That is, they front the money, and after the assessed value comes forward, then the district comes up with whatever it was that we were contributing. Maybe there are some things that we can talk about in terms of the design of the Rivers project as it comes forward as conditions of how those kinds of monies are utilized. And so there may be ways of dealing with both of those needs.
I would like to actually, with your indulgence, use this as a laboratory for answering that question, because I think it's one that should resonate with all of us who drives the ship. And so I think this is a really good time to, again, is there anyone that doesn't want to go there? I don't want to take you where you don't want to go, but it's, I think, a wonderful question, and let's talk about it a little bit. Larry.
Let me kind of respond a little bit to it, because this is the challenge that you run into in all of this. And we're going to be meeting with the Rivers to talk a little bit about that design, not in terms of major changes, what you're probably talking about there, but we can have those discussions. What you run into in these, because when this began, we really were talking about a considerable different design. In fact, we've even talked to them as much as, why build it like that? Why don't you build it with streets running through it that looks very similar to a main street? There's a couple ways to do that. One is we can bring more money to the table, and you've seen the difficulty with financing and if we add to it. At one point we were looking at putting houses on top of the commercial part. We would have had to come up with another $25 million for the parking component that would have gone with that. So then the question becomes, we can do that if we're willing to bring more money to the table. If not, then you can say, well, then we're not interested, and you probably don't get those type of projects. So it's a question really where you want to go, and can you get there? And you're going to run across all of that. You're also going back to this question about being a regional hub. If that's a regional center, these are the type of things you need to bring to it in some form. Now, the design, again, another issue. And if we are too specific in terms of all the different viewpoints that can be brought into it, first of all, you can't finance them, but more importantly, you probably end up losing the project. So that's the political question about how far do we push, what do we want, what kind of resources can we bring to something to make that happen. You're talking about that downtown as well. I mean, we can go and do a study that shows the market feasibility of bringing housing in the downtown. My gut tells me if it was that good already, you would have already seen that from the private side. And again, definitely from a governmental study and folks we have looking at it versus the folks who are really making that investment, unless we're going to build it or put money into it, that becomes an issue. Now, again, if we're bringing dollars to it, you'll see a lot of folks say feasibility is a lot different. That's one reason how we've got to this point, but so far that feasibility has been defined presently with the Rivers as $17.9 million. If we want more, that cost goes up. So.
However, I want to step back, because one reason we haven't signed the DDA is because we have some standards. We have imposed some conditions on them that make it uniquely Oregon City. So I think you should talk about those. I mean, we wanted it to be LEED certified, so the shell is going to be at least.
Yeah, there's several aspects that we've talked about. We've talked about from the part that CenterCal is constructing, that be built to LEED standard. Now, again, we've left that kind of open in terms of which standard they can achieve, and that's something that still has to be worked through that. We've asked that Oregon City's history, at least they consult at the time, it was with CHP, we've got to rethink who it is they visit with now to do that, to make sure that at least there's some reference to that in terms of how that's displayed, and they've presented, when they've come before, some of the things that they've thought about in those regards.
Definitely. So that's in the art and architecture.
Yeah. We've really had a major go-around with the arterial road that runs through that, and that's really been a balancing act. The road is still there. The design of it is different, I'll put it that way, but at least we have that connection through there. One of the things we need to talk about today, and when we want to visit with them, is the way the present design is is there's a large building that backs up to Abernathy. And one of the things, if we're going to develop housing along that Abernathy site, is we have to think about that future development and what they're going to be seeing, because we don't want to get in our own way in those things. So we will be talking about those sorts of things, but if there's more specifics we need, that's the type of input we need. But again, it's a balancing act, and you do run the risk of how much is too much.
You start the dialogue. So.
Okay. Well, one of the really specific things that I would like to see as part of the, if we do have, a lifestyle center or some kind of shopping center, is one of my biggest problems with those shopping centers is that they have absolutely no authentic relationship with the surrounds. They have, these faux facades, but they're really designed to draw people into the stores. And so when you go to the, outside of those stores, you compare it with something like, Paris, where you've got this active street vending, you've got, these promenades with, different layers of retail going on. So you've got the street vendors, then you've got the small stalls, and then you've got, the boutiques, and then you've got the bigger centers. Even looking at, could we even be like a regional market for fresh produce, having something like, a large canopied area, maybe it'd be open, really looking at the great cities of the world and what kinds of attributes can we bring into the project, and perhaps maybe even I don't mind us continuing discussions with CenterCal, but what would it cost to put out a request for interest for parties to look at, what would they put forward, kind of saying, well, these are the criteria that we're looking for, and, are there other investors, particularly, I hate to see all the money generated, the profits going to California. I would like to see them stay in Oregon. I'd like to see them stay in our economy. I'd like to see a local component where we have, a certain percentage set aside for local businesses. Those are the kinds of things I would like to at least, if we're having these discussions, I think they bring us closer to our goals, I think. But that's where I throw it out to the rest of the group.
Okay, Doug, and then Rob.
I guess part of it's going to depend on how big of a built environment you want to have there, because I am sure the cost of doing anything at that site is extremely expensive. We saw that in our Home Depot, where the cost, I think it's something like $5 million more than they thought it would be. I think they made it up, so I don't think that's an issue. But just the fact that it's on a landfill really, as I say, if you want to go into a built environment there, I think you have to have somebody with deep pockets that comes in to work on the project. And then the question is, well, is it a built environment you want there?
You also have to have the rent structures that work, and again, if you're not going to subsidize some of that, some of those smaller pieces really gets very difficult to do it. The 17.9, as Doug has mentioned, is really kind of that basic site improvement, so you can put anything on top of that. You also, what even makes this even more complex, it's not just a deal between us and the rivers. You also have a private owner who owns that site, and he is very interested in moving forward to sell that. The other piece that we can talk about, as he has been talking with, which we've been taking a look at, is another group who would like to put some type of, actually, I don't think they're talking about that site, they're talking about the 16 acres across the way, but you're not going to put that there and try to do the other things we're talking about next to it probably. But he's talking about some type of power generation statement. Now that would require the city doing a number of things. One would, you'd have to, I think a zone change would be required to do that. You would also have to you'd have to vote on some revenue bonds, and again, does that tie with the vision of everything else you're trying to create? And so, those, and if we can't conclude this deal with the rivers, I know that Mr. Parker is really wanting to start talking with other folks about, and I don't think he is specific about what necessarily would go there, as long as they're willing to pay the dollars, but the city's got to be a player in that, because there's a lot of steps that will have to be taken if development's going to take place on that site.
I think that's an important consideration for, if not the rivers, then I think we need to prevent, well, not necessarily what, but what not.
You
And
have that transportation piece you need to be.
yeah, we do. We do. The other thing that I think we failed to say is that an important part of the negotiations all of these years have been connection to downtown, and that really does play into where the orientation of the buildings, the road alignments, and that kind of stuff. Because we definitely wanted the connection into the downtown. Rob,
Some of the ideas that
Doug
Nancy's
and
coming
Doug.
up with are fantastic. I think they're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems with this deal, though, is it's a landfill. Number one.
Yep.
Center Cal has the dollars.
thing.
If they go through it, they have the dollars, and you know, there's the old adage, "She with the gold makes the rules." And if they're spending $300 million, they can tell us, no, we're not doing an open air market because we can build a 4-story space and get $24 a square foot rent, and there's no way we can get that with an open air market. But all that to say, you don't get what you don't ask for. So I think we should engage Center Cal and say, hey, look, this is what we'd like to do. This is what we'd like to see. This would resonate well with the city commission. This would resonate well with the citizens of Oregon City and the surrounding areas. The other point I wanted to bring up is, has anyone from the city or from Leland gone and talked to the city of Tualatin about their dealings with Center Cal? Because maybe what we should do is go to Tualatin and say, hey, if you guys had to do this over again, what would you do differently with Center Cal? Or okay, we'll watch whoever dealt with Center Cal. Has anybody contacted those guys and said, hey, if you were to redo this thing, you could rewind 8 years or however long it's been, what would you do differently? And that might give us some insight as to how they operate, and maybe some things that we should look out for and ask about.
I know one thing already. I mean, we really haven't asked that question, but there.
We actually have had some conversations, and actually Steve Wheeler was over in that area when they were doing some of that.
That's right.
You know what? We haven't had those conversations recently, and their views today may be different. Those are shortly thereafter, and they were so happy with the improvements to the interchange there. But there was you also had a couple of different cities, because that actually crosses a couple of borders, so it really is fairly. They wanted to put housing on that side.
Housing's the big
it was
complaint.
too small. And so they couldn't get that in there. And it's really, I think now, too, I think most folks would say the parking is really squeezed, but still the traffic improvements continue to work very well over there. So
Even with the development in general, as to how hard they found that they could push, or maybe they thought they could have pushed harder for certain features or designs, or what they learned basically from the whole process. I don't think it would hurt us at all to. Unless that discussion's already been had.
Housing is the big one, for sure. As you said, one other thing, too. I just said, and I know I've talked with, the mayor of Gresham and I have talked quite frequently about the improvements there, and I'm not sure that they have very many complaints, because of the development, the surrounding area has just been absolutely incredible. They've been able to finance their new city hall, their new plaza, and a lot of stuff from that increment. So Gresham has changed a lot because of it. But that's a good question.
There was one last thing, though. I think it would be a great idea to brainstorm on the kinds of things that we want to see there if they do indeed move forward, and at least get them out on the table so that they know that we want these things. And I shouldn't say just we. It's not just urban renewal, but the citizens of Oregon City. I mean, let's talk to the people and say, let's have some public discussion. I've heard comments from people asking, when's it going to be done? Like, people already think it's a done deal, and why isn't ground being broken on it? But at the same time, why don't we try and get some input from the citizens of Oregon City, what they'd like to see there, and at least go to Center Cal and say, look, this is.
Remember now, we did have open houses on this, in which people came in and got to comment and all of that stuff. I mean,
They made it
It worked? Did we get a bunch of?
We've got at least their interpreter, but I think we've had those types of. We can go back through. It's very late in the process to do that, but we can go back through, because we did go through a very public process.
They were well attended. Okay.
Were those kind of projects brought up, like the open air market?
I wanted to come to actually the adjacent development in Gresham and then talk about Oregon City. The reason we got Clackamas Landscape Supply there was because they had to move from county leased property, because the county said we were going to move our operations next to Abernathy Creek after the flood over there. Of course, that didn't happen. I think that county property is very important, because we're talking about a regional trail that could go, are you listening to me?
Yes, I am.
What did I say?
You said building a regional trail and the amenities of a
along Abernathy Creek.
I can multitask.
Along Abernathy Creek, and I think have a lot of facilities on the opposite side of the trail will make it a great experience. So the fact that we have room for other developments occurring there, perhaps on the landfill as well, but other places that I think have the potential of far better, at least natural beauty benefit, like Abernathy Creek, than the landfill ever will.
Well, I don't want to sound like a pushover on this Rivers project because I have standards too of what I'd like to see in Oregon City, but I've kind of always seen the rivers as a means to providing us with all the, the ends of other things. So I would absolutely love to see a fancy farmer's market or an outdoor plaza or a semi or half enclosed as a small business incubator, but I would like to see it on downtown because that's where I think there's certain kinds of development I see at a regional center and as a strip mall type thing, and then there's certain things that I think would fit in better downtown. So, like the picture going by here, love to see it, or for performing arts or farmers market, but downtown. So I've always thought that the increment and it being the catalyst to provide the other economic development will help us do some of these creative things that different areas of our town lend itself to, or where they fit in better.
Any other comments? Okay. Jim?
Nancy's raised a point that I think I've expressed in a concern in the past about the sequence of negotiations and how negotiations occur, and this body basically gets kind of a completed deal brought to us at the end of the process to just give a thumbs up or thumbs down to. And some of the I'd like to see if the board is interested in kind of changing that pattern, including just getting some basic information on this deal and its viability. Somebody mentioned, have people talked to other communities in the area that have dealt with CenterCal? When I went to the reunion meeting of the folks that went up to Metro to Vancouver with Robert Liberty, there were folks from all over the area, including all of the communities that CenterCal has operations in, including Gresham, Portland, and Tualatin. And some of the folks, that were there were quite familiar with CenterCal. And one of the things I was skeptical about, I became less skeptical about, particularly whether, in fact, the financing partner of CenterCal was for real. A couple of the folks who were in the know but explicitly prohibited me from using their names suggested that, in fact, the California State Teachers Retirement System does have money that they are looking to invest in. And one of the individuals who spoke with me gave me this challenge to find out the details of how CalSTRS finances their projects. Because one of the things this person mentioned was that when CalSTRS does a project, they go into it with 100% equity. In other words, there's no debt on the project. So CalCenter, if this partnership is similar to their other projects, would come in with all the money on it. And that individual said, if that's the case, you shouldn't be putting any of your own money in this. If there's a gap because of, you need $19 million to do site improvements, well, then if CalCenter is getting 100% equity from CalSTRS, then they can just go to a bank for that extra $19 million, which would be a very small percentage of a $300 million project. And we shouldn't have to put any of our money at risk. The other thing that I was told, and I think I mentioned this at the Citizens Involvement Committee Council meeting that I attended, was one of the experiences that we should look out for as far as Bridgeport, because that was a quarry that had some garbage in it. It wasn't a very serious landfill like the Rossman landfill is. That DEQ did have to come in later on after the project was built regarding some methane leaks, and that we should be very wary in any development agreement of making sure that we're not on the hook as a potential responsible party if something does happen with serious methane or other environmental leaks, that because the Urban Renewal Commission is part of the deal, then we get on the hook legally for environmental abatement and cure. And we can avoid that problem if we just stay out of it and let them get a bank loan for their gap. So those are two of the issues. But I agree with both Rob and Nancy. I would like to be in the process. Mr. Bruning during the meeting in December said that, I guess he, was confident enough to mention CalSTRS by name. If they're for real, then they're for real. But he also was very careful not to mention any pre-leased tenants. And he said that if you want a meeting, we'll be glad to have a meeting with you and disclose these potential tenants confidentially to you. And I don't know, I'm a little bit concerned that we would be spending staff time and money on a development agreement like this without this board itself knowing the details of just, whether there's a deal there or not. And I don't know if CalSTRS is that deep-pocketed that they would front all this money to build this project without any pre-lease tenants. And if Mr. Bruning, had pre-lease tenants, he might have, disclosed them to us. And I just don't want to go into a development agreement with, so many bells and whistles, contingencies on this. Including you have, a couple of years to find a tenant. We don't know enough about this deal, and I'd like to know more about the deal in advance.
Yeah, Jim. Actually, I'd like to stay at the policy level because the finance and all of that stuff is well vetted through the work that happens, on the other side. I think that the value that we have together is...
on the other side, if I may interrupt, Madam Mayor? What on the other side?
The financing is vetted by Leland and by Steve Janik, and because there's very complex financing. Fred has agreed to open his books, as I believe that's one of our policies. Leland's policy, anyway. He doesn't deal with any developer that won't open their books. So there's a great analysis that's able to occur of that. So I think the financing, we have to trust our analysts for that one. And the policies, though, I don't want to apply just to CenterCal. I think the policies that we set should be policies for the city that we would hold. Well, maybe there's some exceptions, but all future development or anything else that went to landfill if this went away. But Larry has some.
But let me add is, and I don't know who you've talked to, and I can't respond on folks that are not familiar with the project we're working on, and I'd question them looking from afar. Fred has never said that he can get financing without pre-leased tenants. In fact, that's been one of the hold-up, and we mentioned that at the last meeting when he came, that one reason why this has begun to move forward is because tenants now have come back and said we would like to put a deal together. Again, we will develop a DDA. They still have to agree. That's why I remain pessimistically optimistic, because we won't know until we see that. Again, they're not going to sign that unless they can get the financing, and they can't get the financing. I don't know if any commercial project can get the financing if they don't have the tenants lined up to do that. So those pieces are all part of it. As regard to go to the bank, all I can tell you is what the discussions we've had there with them. They indicate this is what it takes to put that deal together. This is definitely different than some of these other folks, and for them looking for it, so you can just run down and go to the bank, because they've showed us their numbers. We've looked at that. We have worked very hard to get to what these numbers are to make this deal work, because it has the pencil. If it doesn't pencil, it doesn't work. And I question someone that can comment that specifically on a development that they're not part of, but that's, opinions, everyone has them, so.
Madam Mayor, going back to the question of policy versus, specifics of this deal, I think what Nancy raised it goes to both, actually, because, I mean, if you're talking about a pre-lease tenant as the specifics of a deal, what Nancy raised is, for example, having just kind of out-of-town corporate retail tenants coming into this mall that when people in Oregon City go and buy something, the money leaves this community, as opposed to having a tenant who is an organic Oregon City business that keeps money in the community. And so the fact that there is negotiations going on, there are pre-lease tenants that we don't know about, we're not being disclosed, having disclosure as to who the tenants are, that's not a specific, that is, specific to this deal, but that's also an overriding policy question of what type of community we're building, whether we're having, out of town or out of state or out of country corporate tenants, in this development, as opposed to using an opportunity like this to cultivate something more organically Oregon City. And we don't know, because we don't have disclosure as to what the details of the negotiation are. And I want to have that knowledge in that negotiation to be able to make an informed decision.
I think that the policy, though, is what you said, that if we want to set a policy that a certain percent or however you want to, that certain percent of the tenants need to be local or in Oregon or whatever, I mean, we can, that's a policy decision, but to say you can't have them and you can have them that's a private development decision. We don't have control over that, but we have control over the policy. So I think there's a danger in getting into too much detail, but setting the policy is certainly our right and privilege. Nancy?
I guess also looking far into the future, we have this situation where the Oregon City Shopping Center is kind of a white elephant because, the way that, from what I understand from previous meetings, that the financing has, become so broken down. It's been broken, or whatever it is. I mean, how do we prevent that from happening? I mean, we're in a situation now where nothing can be done, from what I understand, because the way that deal has been structured. And how do we prevent that from happening with any future developments in Oregon City? Is that something that we have any control over? And if we don't, then how are we going to mitigate? If you're talking about a project that takes 20 years before the funds that have been invested by this community are actually repaid, I think we should be looking 20 years into the future as to what is this thing going to be in 20 years. And, with the Oregon City Shopping Center, I think in that case it's been much less than what it could have been because of some things that have happened that, obviously this group doesn't have any control over, but, right. And so same thing with this other, I mean, I just want to make sure that if I'm part of a decision, that I'm making the best decision I can. And I think we need to be aware of, again, the knowledge that is out there, and make sure that we're comfortable with the direction, if this is the time to be asking those questions.
Let me answer a couple of things it's been said. And again, in regards to control, the control that we will have, and it's not forever and ongoing because, again, this is the private sector and you can only do so much of that. There is some control built into the development agreement. One of the things that we've been really wrestling with to make sure is when this development starts is that they have to complete it and get it on the ground. They can't sell it before that's done. Their intention, they indicate, is not to sell. I can't guarantee sometime down the future and how complicated it get. Let me talk a little bit about some of the finances, because again, what we would do would be to, if they complete it, create the increment, is you would reimburse them the $17.9 million, which you will pay a debt service payment on. Debt service payment on that is, I need to look back at the figure, but at the same time, while you're doing that, since you are creating increment, that then you will have that you can then spend on other projects. So you're getting money back at the same time you're paying that off, so you don't have to wait out there 20 years before you begin to get some dollars coming back. I would also challenge the statement about the money leaving town. Yeah, there are corporate headquarters. Yeah, there's some of that with any corporation, but we've documented the expectation on property tax. We've documented the expectation on income tax, and that comes back. Oregon City will get a piece of that. Some of those employees are going to be Oregon City residents. They get paid. They spend that money here. Some money leaves town. Some money does. The question is that a plus to the Oregon City economy or not? It's not like you go out there to the mall and there's not a dime coming back to this community. That's kind of an overstatement of that piece, yeah.
Gas.
I guess my question is, do you know to what extent what the ownership of most of Bridgeport and Gresham Center is?
Right now, I think that is still owned by CenterCal. Yeah, they
I'm
have
confused. I believe Commissioner Nocita was using Cal Stearns.
California State Teachers Retirement System.
Okay.
Which is another pension fund. The other one is a California Public Employees Retirement System. So there are two different pension funds down there.
And, we haven't seen the list of tenants that they have talking to at the present time. I have the list that they had before. I'd be glad to visit with you individually. Again, they don't have those signed up. I can tell you who they're talking about. If that is helpful to anyone. Again, I don't think they want that stuff publicly, and if we were to go out here and begin to talk about that publicly, there's a good chance that we could get in the way of those deals coming together, and I think that would have a couple of issues on that front.
Okay, so let's again bring it back to the focus here.
Crank it.
Let's don't get cranky, though. This is a very good discussion. I'm want to find out if it's timely, because if we wish to develop policies for development in the North End, or whatever we're focusing on, I assume that that's what it is. I hope it's not just for that one area. I hope it's for the whole area. Then what is the timing, and how does that enter into the negotiations that are getting close to the nth hour? So can the two of you comment on that? Because if we don't want to, I don't want us to spin our wheels if they're not worth spinning. But let's have comment first, and then.
We do have a meeting set up to once again just go through the design. What we will do is we'll contact a few of you, and Nancy will probably try to get you involved in that, so we can have some of these discussions and be very specific, and you can also kind of see firsthand that you can report back then as well, so it's not just coming from me.
So at this point, to take our list of discussion points and take them face-to-face to Bridgeport is our first option, because I guess that's pretty casual. It may be the best shot we've got right now in the timing, but if we wish to codify them, that'll take us a little bit longer. I mean, how should this work?
Let's have a discussion with them first to see what's on the table.
Okay, but I'm also kind of trying to think long-term, so maybe you can bring that back to us, because I assume we all care about this, right? That these kind of policy choices would be on the table for further development, or if this falls through for the next iteration. That I'm seeing tired eyes around the table and not head nods. Rob, you want to comment? Or actually, I think Doug first, and then Rob.
It's just a comment, and this discussion's great. The kind of thing that we're talking about occurring at the Cove at this particular time, however, has gone over a 15-year period. I mean, it's not something that's been new. And I mean, who was the group that was before? Mills. I think it was about 15 years ago when they were actually looking at this particular site, and it turns out things didn't work out very well for Mills. But it's not that this is kind of a new creation by any existing member of this commission. In fact, it's not.
I understand that. I guess that's why I'm thinking forward. I mean, currently, if we can interject that and get some of you involved in those conversations, I think that's a wise short term. But I mean, my interest for the long term would be putting some policies in place. So I guess again, focusing. So should we have that scheduled for a one issue meeting where we talk together with staff about whether we need codes or just policy statements, or do we just want a statement of cooperation of understanding? I mean, I don't know really what the vehicle is, but I think it's very timely. No, I think we're probably too late for that, but we need to find out, because these discussions are going on now. So we'll interject. I mean, these are the things that I've written down. What the relationship to the surrounding area. So how does the project integrate? Is there a local component? Can more of the money stay here, or however it wants to be stated? This is a little bit off topic, but what would the communities where Bruning developments, Center developments exist do differently? Can there be some relationship to local amenities like regional trails and walkability? And what's the prognosis for what this is going to look like in 20 years? How do we know that this is a paradigm that'll fit? Those are the ones I have. I think if we miss some, make sure you speak up.
I've got a few others, too.
You have some others? Okay. Why don't you list them out, because I missed them on my list.
And some of these are just kind of statements. The question of full facades, not authentic structures, the active street, the development of promenades at different layers of commercial activity, small style, regional markets for fresh produce, great cities of what type of attributes they have, what would it cost for that type of interest, local components certainly set aside for local businesses, connections downtown. Then there's a comment on Abernathy Creek with some of that development actually being more directed towards there, basic info on the deal and its viability. The CalSTRS, the no debt on the project, should have this question about going to the bank, or should we have to put money into it? What controls do we have?
Those aren't all for them, though.
No. This is just a discussion.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No. I was trying to separate out. I got to separate all this back out. Yeah, no. I was trying to separate out the policy issues that would enter into discussion. Yeah, and then I think that there needs to be a more focused discussion among us for policies.
I think it's. I mean, we reached no agreement here. The point is that I think it is appropriate to maybe share these concerns when the meeting is being held with.
That's what I was trying to separate out, the ones that go to them and the ones that don't. Rob.
I think what we need to keep in mind, too, is that, again, if this was a prime piece of property, it would have been developed a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
And
we know
what this really comes down to is it worth it? Are we going to draw a line in the sand and say, look, if you don't have the open air market and you don't have at least 50% local businesses in this facility, we're not going to provide any urban renewal funds? Or are we willing to do the benefits of bringing something in there with potentially $3.5 million in annual tax revenue, right, for the cities and
let me go back and verify.
Or more, but I mean, whatever it is, does that outweigh the fact that we may have a bunch of out-of-state corporations there and maybe some facades that aren't, authentic shale and authentic brick? And that's what it comes down to, basically, is we have to say, are we going to be okay if it's not perfect? And I don't think we're going to have a perfect deal. I just don't think it's going to happen. The fact of the matter is we have to decide, does the benefit of having this and the however many hundreds of jobs that it brings and the $300 million in money to develop it outweigh the fact that we aren't able to do an Abernathy Green? Because if we want to decide that we don't want to do this, we want to wait, it might be another 50 years before anybody comes in there with a new technology that can clean it up and blah, blah, blah. We just need to decide. And plus in this economy right now, too, it's like Yeah, we just need to decide. And I think we should go to them and express our concerns and what we would love to see, but at the same time, is that worth, throwing the whole thing away? Are we going to draw a line in the sand and say, unless it's like this?
Let me ask that, because I think that's that's a directional question. Is this discussion a deal breaker for everyone around the table? I mean, we've already voted, so we know that it's a deal breaker for two of you. Is it a deal breaker for the majority? Because that's a different kind of discussion. Sorry, I got off line here. I think it's Brian and Don. And then, Jim, do you have your hand up? Oh, sorry. Okay. Brian.
And Rob was he jumped right on what I was going to say, and to continue on with that, and somebody brought it up already, is that if this doesn't go through, you got to be prepared for the next person that has the deep pockets that wants to develop that site. And that's probably somebody you really don't want to have there. And that could be a big store of some kind that we've already gone through with this city.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think you want that to happen, and they've got deep pockets, and you've got to think about what the possibilities that you don't want there. So I think Rob's correct in that I think that we need to approach these guys and tell them what our thoughts are and see how agreeable they are. If they're not, that kind of shows them what they are. But I think they might be receptive to some of these things, to be a good partner with this city. I don't, and as you said, if this was a very developable site, it probably already would have been. But it's,
We need to be, there's just a philosophy of the right way to negotiate. We've been working with these guys for a long time. They've invested $6.5 or $7 million. This is not the time to be all of a sudden changing the basic rules that have gone over all these years. I agree with trying to get what we can in at the last minute of things that would be nice to have, but I also think there's an ethical issue of what you may intend to do with somebody who's walked this path with us and invested a lot in the process over a period of time. So that's just my feelings in that. Some of this makes me a little uncomfortable in light of that. So,
yeah, I'm just about to throw that deal breaker thing out there again. Jim.
I want a reminder. You said there was a vote where it was a deal breaker for two of us. I don't think. No, but I'm not remembering what vote you're talking about.
Well, we voted. You voted no at the commission meeting.
Yeah.
I think it was.
No, there was no. You mean the city commission meeting?
Yeah.
We didn't have a city commission meeting vote on the rivers.
We voted on the rivers.
We haven't voted on. Now,
we did it urban renewal.
Yeah. It was here. Maybe it wasn't city commission. Was it urban renewal?
It was urban renewal.
Yeah, it was urban renewal.
It was urban renewal.
Voting to actually undertake negotiations on this specific development agreement? I don't think we did.
Because we don't have a development agreement.
No, to move forward. I'm still not clear on what.
There wasn't a vote taken.
I'm not sure there was a vote.
Vote on that? It must have been a specific piece of it. I thought we did.
No.
I requested any negative comments should be brought out at that time. That's what I said.
Yeah.
But there
weren't any.
That's true.
Well,
there was no vote taken.
You kind of threw that out there as a surprise. We didn't have time to really put together any kind of cogent thoughts. And not only that, but, we had Fred Bruning representing CenterCal there to give us a presentation. And, I guess, I felt like, you don't say speak now or forever hold your peace in that. It would have been difficult to respond. At least for myself personally, but going back to the question of, I don't even expect this group to agree with me on what's important. All I wanted to raise was that from my personal perspective, I think some of these shopping malls don't have. And when I talk about inauthentic facades, I'm talking about they kind of do this decorative stuff on the outside, but there's no functional. It's not functional at all. So it gives you this weird sense of how it connects to the community. But what I'm putting out there is that what's good enough for us, and since all of these negotiations are taking place without me being able to respond, I feel like it's difficult to support because I feel like so much of it is unknown. And I also feel like, to respond to your comment, you could say that the world is the same today as it was a few years ago, or you can say that things have changed dramatically, and maybe we should take a pause and look at the economies. I know that that CalSTRS had an unfortunate financing arrangement with the Coin Center recently, and so again, we're looking at a lot of financing involved and opportunity costs. I'm not saying I disagree with the direction that things are going, but I personally don't feel rock solid about, giving it a yes vote.
Away from, I guess, what Nancy just said. I'm glad you raised that meeting in December because I thought the meeting was quite strange myself. Because it came within a week of some publicity from the Oregon City News suggesting that a different path was possible. But the whole meeting had this very odd sense of orchestration, having out of nowhere, here's the developer again, here's Dave Leland saying that, oh gosh, we're in the middle of the recession, but I'm really excited about the prospects for real estate again. And then, no, there was not a vote taken to move forward. We just had the city manager said, "Oh, I will get you a development agreement," or Commissioner Neely saying, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." And Doug, I can understand where you were coming from on that, but.
Let's talk about where we want to go from here.
It was just not, having that tidal wave come after us, sitting up on that.
That was then. Could I stop that here? Let's talk about where we want to go from here, please.
I don't want to. In order to go forward, we have to know where we're coming from. I'm sorry,
yeah.
but I personally was just not prepared to say anything that night. Because like I said, I was hit by this tidal wave. I didn't have any information. I didn't have any time to reflect. I wasn't going to, speak yes or nay because that was the first night I was hearing any of that information, and I wasn't going to speak off the cuff, yea or nay. This is a good idea or this is a bad idea.
I would point out though, you were the one that sent out a memo to all of us members here about a complete reuse of that area. And that would have been an appropriate time to bring it up.
No, it wasn't. It was not. Absolutely not, because that was the first night I was hearing from Mr. Bruning and from Mr. Leland and all of the stuff. There was no way, because, frankly, I think that show, and that's what it was, a show, I think that show was orchestrated that night specifically to squash and squelch any type of discussion about moving in a different direction.
If I may.
Yes.
When I made that statement, I preceded it by a statement. Several of us have been lobbied by other interest groups. You were, and I was. And some of the things we were putting out there, I thought were, maybe there were possible alternatives. That's simply because I hadn't heard Senator Cal come for us from some period of time.
We thought they were dead.
Once that came forward, I thought that was the time, actually, to say, well, are there other alternatives that we want to look at that particular point? So, I'm not going to apologize for the statement.
Sure.
If I didn't know anything about people lobbying us, then I probably wouldn't have ever made a statement like that. But the fact is, people were lobbying us. Yeah. I thought, well, gee, there's some good ideas there.
I think what you're leading to. I think maybe here's the meeting of the minds on this, because I think, again, because a lot of these conversations take place behind closed doors, this board and the public is not informed to be able to say what are the alternatives. No, I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to name this developer who's interested in this alternative. I don't know whether that's confidential or not. but I would like to be able to have him or any other promoter of a waste-to-energy facility or a power plant or something else to just be able to come and talk about it, to give us a sense of what's possible. I mean, if the revenue streams, okay, so I mean, the way I've heard it discussed, it's kind of been denigrating this power plant idea because we have to issue non-recourse revenue bonds if we want to do something like that. All right, we have public involvement in that. We have public involvement in this with urban renewal bonds. So each idea has some public financing component. So why don't we put everything on the table and give everybody an idea of the big picture of the possibilities and move forward that way? I mean, Brian was just saying, we got to be prepared if this fails. What's the alternative? Well, the alternative might be we don't have a shopping mall, but we do have a power plant, and we can get a lot of revenue either way. Okay. The alternative might be a power plant and a shopping mall, and we get a lot of revenue.
I need us to focus.
But I'd like us to focus. But what I'm saying is we're talking without everything on the table. Okay. And I think we need to have all the information and all the possibilities on the table to get a direction. I would like to suggest process again, because that's, I think, where we are. What I'm hearing you say is that, that we haven't talked about enough alternatives. All right. So what we have, though, on this hand is we have a development on the table and staff is way out there in doing what they assume is our direction to bring that. We've been working on it. Are we in our third year on that one?
No, since I've been on commission, it's 4.5.
Okay. That we've been working with various aspects of that. So there's a lot of history that has happened before this. So on one hand, we have that. And that is where I think we need to be very clear tonight whether the staff has the direction to go forward and make that the best possible development it can be using the discussion that we had. And then on the other hand, we have the power plant and perhaps some other alternatives that belong in a separate discussion of other possibilities in the area. And I've always thought that we needed to master plan that whole area so that we knew which components would fit. That's been my objective, but we haven't really had the luxury to do that. So I think we need to put all of that in context. But I mean, I don't know that we can leave here tonight without staff being assured that they can schedule those meetings and go ahead. And I'm hearing pretty broad support for going ahead with some contingencies and caveats. So let's talk about that a little bit more. And then I think Jim's idea of other alternatives probably needs to exist over here. And there are
different sites.
What? Yeah, with different sites that are around in that area, because they're certainly not all taken up.
The dilemma that I have, and it's really where you want me to go with it, is we've had a long process on this. There's been lots of public involvement on it, and we've been working with these folks, and there's lots of different partners. The question is, do I try to put together a deal, or do you want to go back and talk about different options? If you want to go talk about different options, I need to tell this person we're not ready to even do a deal. And I think they're going to say, fine, because I agree with Don, there's going to be some issues there. But I need to know that because we're fixing to spend some more money next week, because when I turn this over to Janik, which we've sent, that clock is ticking, that's costly. So are we talking about options, or are we trying to put together a deal? And again, we can talk about some of these other things. This is a lifestyle center. They're only going to do so much. You see them all over, and if we don't want that, we need to know that. And we can tweak it some, but basically they got a formula, and that's how they finance it, and they're only going to go so far. And we've been pushing on that from day one. And a lot of things that we've talked about here tonight, we've covered those bases time and time again.
I think we're talking about Center Cal on one hand and other options over here.
One of the other issues we need to put on the table is maybe how we operate, because there was no covert operation to bring that to you. And the question I have is, do I package stuff when it comes to me and bring it to the commission, or do I wait? Because I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. So you guys, at some other time, we need to talk about
operating procedures. Okay. Doug?
Well, it comes back to that. I'm sorry. I am focused, but making deals behind closed doors was yours term, and I presume it has to do with this. In fact, the city manager was given direction by the Urban Renewal Commission to pursue Center Cal. This wasn't behind closed doors.
Never.
You want to talk about behind closed doors, it's you putting out that memo as if you've got all these bright ideas, when in fact, they were put to you by a developer. That was behind closed doors. You remember contained all the stuff about having a power plant and all these other things. That was after you had, a developer had spoken to you.
No, that's not true.
Okay,
That's
let's
just
put that
not
off.
true. That's-
This isn't
They talked to me about that, said they talked to
You're
you.
out of order.
The fact of
I
the
would like
matter
to
is,
have
I've been
a
talking about waste to
intermission.
energy
Okay.
facilities since January.
We are going to take a break.
Since January.
No, okay.
With a lot of people,
5-minute break.
including
Our city manager. So I guess we're not quite ready. Started.
One of those big please.
I think what we need to come to agreement on at the end here, since we only have 15 more minutes, and it would really be good to get us out. Oh, we have one. We have one returning. Okay. Is there any different direction that we need to give staff regarding this development?
Also, anything else that folks want to talk about?
And then the parking lot. Are there other issues? Because we've identified a few that we had agreement on that we wanted to, discuss in depth at future meetings. And I think this is the point to put the rest of those on the table. Not that we'll get to many of them probably before the new city manager arrives. So that'll probably be a different agenda. But
If I'm lucky, that'll be before 9 o'clock.
yeah, no, it needs to be before 9 o'clock.
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock is our goal. So, so one question on the table, let's take that first. Is there a different direction that we need to give our staff regarding the negotiations with the development that's been, not an old one?
We'll push on these topics to see what we've got.
Yeah, with the caveat that these topics that we've discussed will be part of that, and we'll include Nancy in the...
I think it would be nice if they do have a design that they can share with the commission, or, as the changes are coming along, it would be nice to have a reaction to it. I mean, I think everybody would probably appreciate having more frequent updates as far as what it is that they're looking at.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, the one thing that we do really understand, I think, is that the project was essentially dead during the whole formative, the majority of the formative time for the new Urban Renewal Commission. So, yeah, that obviously, contributed to the lack of remembering or the lack of knowing about the details, and it has changed multiple times across the age. So, I'm not hearing anybody that is opposed to a different direction for staff and to continue forward.
That hasn't already said.
That hasn't already expressed it. Okay, yeah, so I hear majority. Okay, secondly then, let's put some other things, I call them in the parking lot, because it's the place where we'll, where there are topics that we should discuss. So one of them would be alternatives such as the power plant that would be possibilities for siting in that North End area. Is that broad enough? Are you all interested in that? I mean, I think the power plant presentation's been given to all 5 of the city council members, but I don't think any of you have had that. Jim?
Just to assure Doug against any conspiratorial tendencies on
He's
my
not
part.
here yet, so you don't need to talk to Doug.
I want to have a discussion broadly, not about any one particular power plant, but the idea of energy production in general. I raised this at the CIC meeting too, about the idea of creating like a public power entity for Oregon City, like they have in Eugene, in Kaiser, and some other towns. Various technologies that are out there. The proponent has mentioned one, but there are others. The one I really talked about in the memo was plasma arc incineration, which is a different technology than this promoter.
So energy production possibilities and alternatives. Okay? And others. Daphne?
If this is the wish list time,
Yes.
I would like to I would like to
Discussion topics.
explore if there's any possibilities of how we can make a space in our Main Street area or a farmer's market or maybe other performing venues, or it could serve for other performing venues, or as a small business incubator. So it'd be a semi-open, maybe, or maybe it's converting a building with outside space.
Am I missing something? Those are, to me, that sounds like two things. Performing arts,
Well, okay, that is just it. Let's put
space
performing
plus-
arts, how we could maybe do something for performing arts space, and then farmer's market,
Incubator.
farmer's market and small business incubator.
I see the farmer's market being as this use of public
You
space.
yeah, but it needs to be covered of somewhat, or
Oh, covered, okay. And
Round.
yeah, for year round. But
okay, and then business incubator. Okay, Rob.
One thing that we haven't talked about, I don't know if this is taboo or what because of how long you've been there, but stuff's going on with the mill, and I think there's speculation as to what, but can urban renewal play a part in that? I mean, we would have to bring the mill property into urban renewal, but is that something we can talk, is that a topic of discussion, or is it taboo and we need to leave it to the county and whoever? Or, I mean, I think it'd be cool if you could shrink the mill and make it a boutique paper mill. Like, I've done some research on some mills in Washington and in New Hampshire, and
Because, again, they will be, especially what we've been talking about. We can
make it a tourist attraction.
Make an executive session likely, so, okay,
Yeah, same
that's
discussion,
good.
'cause,
Mhm. Yeah, because definitely impacts.
Like they need help, and
Yeah.
it's a amazing property, and if you could make it a boutique paper mill so it still retains jobs, but at the same time you could possibly redevelop some of it and
try to have that on probably the agenda for February, just to update you, and again, also to kind of chat with you about, because we'll schedule it, so, yeah, because you might want to see if that's the direction that the Urban Renewal Commission wants to go in, because that's the party actually will tie into this. So.
I'd like to bring up something else regarding the Oregon City Shopping Center, because it's always discussed, and it's always, it seems that discussions begin and end with unsubstantiated anecdotal evidence.
As to what?
As to, for example, well, they've got this lease structure that makes perfect
We know
sense.
that.
I don't know that. I've never seen any evidence. All I hear is what people are have discussed.
I have the for sale listing. The flyer.
Well, there's
You guys
more.
can
There's
share
more
that.
than that. There's more than that involved in something like this. I want to see if we could get a due diligence package on the Oregon City Shopping Center, as far as somebody. If people throw out numbers like it takes $5. Anybody who buys that building is going to have to shell out $5 million to get over this and that problem with. Well, let's get the numbers on the table in a binder.
For what purpose?
Discussing options.
Private development.
So is the Rossman landfill.
The difference is Rossman Landfill has an owner who is working with us who wants to do something on that site. We have tried to contact Oregon City Shopping Center. That's been unsuccessful.
Well, Rob just said it's for sale. Let's get the information on what's involved.
It was for sale 2 years ago. I don't know if it's still.
No, it turned out.
I've heard it's for sale as soon as this
Yeah, we
summer.
did. We had a report from Leland on that.
When? I mean, was
If it was a year and a half, it wasn't us.
Yeah, because they were talking about, the two developers actually looked at.
We also had Pacific Property Search look at it. At one time, we had a discussion with CenterCal, and so they approached them, looked at the site as well.
again, that's anecdotal. I'd like to see the evidence in a binder as to what's going on with that.
Why is it anecdotal when your city manager, whose job it is to present factual information, tells you that?
The city manager presents us factual information all the time in memos and facts and with supporting documentation. I don't see why this is any different.
well, I guess then my question may be incorrect, but, or that took the wrong tack, is that, when we ask our city manager to produce stuff, it needs to have a definite purpose. I don't see where the Urban Renewal Commission can really influence this in a productive way that will make up for the cost of putting the memo together. I think.
If the commission is interested, here what I can do. I can find out if the property is still for sale. If it is, I can find out what the purchase price. Last time I looked at it, I think it was in the neighborhood of $30 million. Now, again, I can run down that path again if you want me to. Here's the issue that you face. Let's say it costs $30 million. Let's say it costs $10 million. The increment on the shopping center is there. You've just seen the budget up here, which if you want to stop the cove, you have $7 million. If you do the cove, it's going to be, and we don't get development on that, you're out to 2017. So if they want to sell it, let's say for $10 million, and that's where do we go to get the money? And then when you go to redevelop that, whatever bump you have in increment is going to be on top of the existing value that's there, which is going to be a smidgen. And so for that smidgen to fund the $10 million, it just doesn't pencil. So unless you have another way to create a lot of increment to bring it in to look at the Oregon City Shopping Center, at this particular juncture, it's a bridge too far. Now, you do have in your urban renewal plan, I think we've got $1 or $2 million in there to assist them with redevelopment. One of the keys to being able to do that is the cove and the rivers development. You take those off, you see the budget, where does the money come from? I'm glad to run down that path, but it's going to take us to a point that I'm just explaining to you. I don't know how you do it right now. And if I could see it, I'd be interested in having that discussion myself, because I think the thing could definitely use modernization. It's got to make financial sense, and it doesn't right now. It is, yeah. Well, we've got either $1 or $2 million in there for assistance.
For the road line.
No, we actually put some in for the shopping to kind of help encourage them to redevelop it sometime. But right now, you don't have that money. And the question is, I can get all that information from you, but even if it was the best deal in town, where do you get the money? I mean,
they're interested in going down that route.
All this discussion about urban renewal, I mean, if we go to contingency period 2 in urban renewal, the projects we have committed is what we can do. You don't really have more money right now. I mean, you might squeeze out 100,000 here, 100,000 there, but beyond what's in that plan, you're committed until we have increment that's going to grow so we can do something else. So a lot of this discussion is future stuff.
Okay, Brian.
Actually, I think with, and we're optimistic that the rivers and the Cove project go. If they do, they're going to influence that shopping center.
It will.
Yeah. Somebody's going to do something with that shopping center if those two go on board. So,
one of the discussions is kind of interesting, and it goes back to the discussion on the mill. And the question is, are we proactive or do we wait? Because, and there's a gamble both ways. Let's say the mill cannot recover from bankruptcy and goes away. If the economy improved and somebody's going to redevelopment, would it be somebody looking to redevelop it as we kind of have in our mind? And so if that's the case, maybe I'll just sit and assist. Now, the flip side of that is you can't really cite those type mills in this country anymore, and if somebody had a chance to do it, you've got one that's zoned that way sitting there, they could jump into that. We know the mill's very small footprint. It's tough to make it a go there. So it's a question of how much risk you want to take in terms of whether you want to be proactive or just kind of take a wait-and-see approach. And, that's one of the discussions.
That's a good discussion topic, though. Okay, in the 4 minutes left, are there any other topics to put on the table? Jim.
I would like a presentation, preferably at our next meeting, for a presentation on the due diligence work on the Cove that we paid $1.2 million for. That's a lot of money, and I would like to know what the work product is. I would like to see exactly what we bought.
For phase 1, okay.
I don't know if we can have that ready for next meeting, but we'll see. If not, we can get it maybe in March.
Put that on as soon as possible, then. I assume that everyone's interested in that. Is that true? Head nods around, okay. Any other topics? Well, I think we've got a good plan outlined, and if you also are in agreement that one topic, if we could ask staff to do that. I mean, I think actually I hope you would like that, because we've been loading up the agenda pretty tightly, and I think we have some things to consider I'd love to probe more deeply into things in the time we have allowed. We just don't ever have enough time at the Urban Renewal Commission, so. Anyway, I'm looking, so just to summarize, I assume that you would be open for meeting with the new city manager. Well, you're talking about before the new city manager comes? Oh, okay. Two things then. Yeah. Two things. Well, you know what? I'm not sure that we need to get back together again in this kind of setting unless we wish to take these topics then, because what the alternative would be to start bringing the topics to the Urban Renewal Commission and doing the work there, which spreads it out a little bit, and then schedule our next retreat with the new city manager, so to kind of review and refine the work plan. Are there other, is that okay as a process for now? Probably all tired, sorry. Okay. Can we do it in January? When's our? Bylaws for January, okay.
I remember.
Yeah, well, that's right, we haven't, okay. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, get a holdover till okay, so, election of officers, it sounds like there's some self-interest involved in that. So, thank you. I think it was a good discussion. I felt we were focused, and it's nice to have this informal setting in which to, put a range of topics on the table. So, I appreciate all of your patience. So, City Council, City Commission, we'll see you at 7:30 a.m.
For breakfast or 8:30 for the meeting?
No.
I know.
No,
2
it's
minutes?
7:30 for breakfast and the meeting.
I might not be here. I'll be here at 7:20.
Well, if you wish to change that?
Pardon?
The meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, is that okay with everybody, or do you want to slide a little?
I'd like to slide, but I mean,
I know, I would too, but get it over with. Maybe
I'm a slacker.
Maybe we can get out before 3. Okay, we are adjourned. Again, thank you very much. And have a